Welcome everybody, and especially new members and those new to the Scrutiny Management Committee. And I'd also like to welcome some people who are on Teams. That's Gregor, who will be joining us to talk about the climate emergency, who is the executive member for the environment, which also includes climate change. And we also have some observers, also some officers. We have Will Roper, who'll talk about the performance indicators, Rhian Hayes and Diana Torva, who are going to be talking about climate change, and they're also on Teams. I just thought, as we were so spread out and some of you don't know each other, that it could be quite useful if I just go around and mention people's names so that you know who's where and where they're sitting. Over on my left, your right, is... So I always want to call you Paul. It's Jim Fruin. So, next to Jim is Sarah Kerr, and next to Sarah is Paul. And then we have Norman Jorgensen and Sam Akhtar. That's the front row. Behind Sam is Rebecca Margetts. Next to Rebecca is Alison Swaddle. And then going further on, we have Rochelle Shepherd-Dubay. Behind Rochelle, we have Rachel Burgess and Guy Granderson and Jackie Rance in the back row. So you should have your names in front of you anyway, but you will all soon very easily get to know each other. I'm going to ask Neil, first of all, if he could just clarify where we are with these wretched COVID tests, because I think there have been some some difficult emails this evening about what we have to have done and what we don't have to have done on when. So I'll just ask Neil if he could explain what's got to happen.
Okay, hello members. Yesterday an email went round to all officers and members saying that anyone coming into Shoot End had to take one of the surge tests. So today I sent that round to you all. I've then sought clarification because a number of you had problems getting in to get that done before this meeting. So the suggestion is that if possible, you might want to get a surge test over the next few days before the surge testing finishes at the weekend. So that is the latest guidance and the latest situation.
Neil, how often do we have to have a surge test as opposed to a lateral flow test?
Yep. So as far as I'm aware, the guidance simply said that if you've had one of these surge tests, well, what they actually are is a PCR test. If you've had one in the last 90 days, you don't need to have another one. If you live or work in Norries, Westcott, Bournemouth and Whitegates, or Evandens, if you can have one of these PCR tests at any of the sites in the borough before Sunday when we finish them, that would be fantastic. But it's based on trust. We can't enforce anyone to have them.
Paul. Thank you, Pauline. So what's wrong with a lateral flow test if you're not in a surge area?
So the PCR tests are, as far as I'm aware, again, I'm not an expert on this, they're much more accurate. From what I hear from officers, they are much more accurate at picking up the Delta variant of the COVID strain, and you are in one of the surge areas by virtue of the fact of coming to this meeting tonight, being in the Evandens area. So.
Sorry, Embrook, actually. It's not in a surge ward, just to clarify.
Okay.
I'm not interrupting, sorry.
In which case, my apologies. But this is just what we were told this is what we were told needs to happen.
This actually sits in Embrook ward, so it's not in a surge area.
I think it might be possibly quite helpful, Callum, if you could send another email to all members, making it clear exactly who's got to do what, especially those of us who don't live in those 4 wards, and how often we need to have what done, then we'll all be clear. Thank you very much indeed. Before I start the meeting,
Jim.
Sorry, Jim.
Just for clarification, because of my volunteer work for the NHS, they won't actually surge test me here. So you're going to have to trust me on my natural flow and what the NHS are doing.
Yeah. Okay, just before I start the meeting formally, oh, sorry, Rochelle.
They're only doing surge tests at most of the sites right now, including the Tinglesham Court. So they're not doing anything else. They're not doing lateral flow tests. But I've had a lateral flow test as well anyway, because I have them at home.
Okay, have we done with surge testing then? Thank you. Before I formally open the meeting, just want to remind you of a couple of things. Firstly, this is a formal meeting, which the public are able to watch. So if you want to speak, please can you raise your hand and wait to be called. And when you speak, please remember to turn on your microphone. You may, as some of you have already done, need to wave around your screen at me because I don't see very well through this screen, especially when I'm looking through too. So make sure I notice you. And secondly, please remember that we are critical friends. This was reinforced last night at the training, and we are about driving improvements for the council, but in a supportive way. Therefore, I expect your questions to be framed in a non-aggressive way, please, and in a non-political way. Thank you very much. All right, then let's turn to the agenda. Neil, are there any apologies for absence?
No, full house.
Thank you. And the minutes of the previous meeting, to confirm them as a correct record, I would suggest on this occasion, if you weren't there at the last meeting, that this time you abstain. So can I see those in favour of those minutes as a correct record, please? Thank you. Anyone against? And abstentions? Brilliant. Thank you very much. So those minutes are agreed. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Yep. Are there any public questions, Neil?
No,
And are there any member questions?
no.
Thank you. So we now move to item 6, the quarterly performance management report. This is for Q4, going up to the end of the financial year. They are, as you've probably noticed, set out in a slightly different way from previously. And I think it is clearer and it's a more useful way. So before we actually look at the papers themselves, I'm going to ask Will Roper if he would like to explain very briefly what he's done with these pieces of data, because he's the one who put it together. So I'll hand over to Will now on Teams. Thank you, Will.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Madam Chairman. So when I first attended your overview and scrutiny meeting in the previous quarter, I had a very clear message from all of you that you were being slightly frustrated, perhaps with a little bit of a lack of context and story and some commentary at a senior level around this report. And in order to try and address some of that, we've introduced a series of director slides and a page as well from Susan, the Chief Executive. Now, this hopefully gives a sense of the story and the work, the great work that the officers have been doing over the last quarter. Highlights their wins, the three or four things that have gone really, really well, and the opportunities to look to in the future, and also I think highlights any risks or challenges to the services within each directorate. So that's the first measure we've done. We've also included the roundel for each directorate, so you can start to see the performance within each area of the council, and they give a real flavour of how each directorate is performing. And again, I hope you find that useful to maintain a more strategic view of the performance of the council. I think, if I may as well, I'll just talk to some of the changes that we're hoping to progress over the next year. So for our next quarter, which will be Q1 of the new municipal year, we're reviewing our KPIs. Now, currently there are over 60 KPIs in this report, and that's an awful lot, I think. And I think you'd probably agree that getting a sense of what's really going on and a sense of the really important stuff to our residents is sometimes difficult just with the sheer amount of information in this report. So we're going through a process at the moment with each service, reviewing the KPIs that they report and making sure that they're important and valuable KPIs for you and for our residents, and making sure as well that they have a direct and clear measure of the corporate delivery plan. And hopefully these two things, these two initial steps, will start to give you an opportunity, as I say, to maintain a more strategic view and to work towards keeping some of the detail, stopping people from getting bogged down in some of the detail, which I think is a real tendency with such a big report with so many KPIs. We will hopefully be continuing to progress and evolve the report over the remainder of the year, but those are the first two changes. First of all, this one, and obviously the second one for Q1.
That's super. Thank you very much. Well, I certainly look forward to the day when we could have the data that's bang up to date, not 3 months out of date, but I'm sure you'll be working on that.
We are working on something, but it may take us a while.
Sarah, and then Jim, Paul, and Rachel.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Will. I've got a few points. I wanted to talk more overarching about this. And the last time we had this, which was the 24th of February, I'm just going to quickly read an extract from the minutes of that meeting. Members asked for a report to the next meeting of the committee with opposite recommendations on the options for improving the quarterly performance report process. The aim was to make the most effective use of member and officer time whilst ensuring that performance issues were addressed and reported in a timely manner. We've not had that, and I'm hoping that that is still going to be something that happens, because the issue we've got is, as you say, we've got this really big report. It's very difficult to drill down into things because we don't have the various directors here to actually ask the questions direct of, and we need to understand actually what we're trying to get out of this report at a time. So my first question is about, when are we going to get that report? Can we get that scheduled into a meeting? I understand you're looking at this, so if we could be part of the process as to how you formulate this, that would be really good. I do have some specifics as well about some of the individual KPIs, and one of the queries that applies to quite a few of them is it's not clear in some of them how the targets are set. So I'll give you an example. Let's look at page 39. No, not page 39. Let's have a look at page 33, which is CS5, percentage of former care leavers up to age 21 in education, employment or training. Firstly, that should be up to the age of 25. We have a statutory duty for our care leavers up to the age of 25, not 21. The target is 52%. I don't quite understand how we've got such a specific target. And also, given that as corporate parents, we're supposed to be treating our children and care leavers as though they're our own, I find 52% completely unacceptable. I have 2 children. That's like saying it's okay if one of them is in education, employment and training, and it's perfectly acceptable that one of them isn't, and it's not. So I think we need to actually unpick some of these KPIs in a bit more detail, and councillors need to be part of that process. Another example is on page 41, I believe.
Sarah, would you mind if we come to the individual KPIs after people's general points? Then you can raise them then.
Well, this is
I'm
this.
going to ask Will if he'll respond to the points you've made now.
Okay, I was just going to give another example, but
Will?
that's fine. I would like to ask about individual KPIs in a bit though, please. Thank you.
Will?
Yeah, so absolutely, we are in the process of building a report and a series of proposals for improving this report, and we will bring it back to ONS when it's ready.
When will that be?
As soon as I'm able to do it. I'm sure you'll appreciate that the officers are extremely busy. We just have a few things to work for, and we'll bring it back to this committee as soon as I'm able to.
Thank you, Will. Jim, a general question, please, from you. When I say Jim, I mean Paul.
Yeah, I'll be Jim, Paul, for tonight.
No,
Thank
sorry.
you, Pauline.
Been away too long.
Thank you, Will, for your report. General question from me first is, how are the green, amber and red status worked out for each of the KPIs? Because I'm struggling to find a correlation.
Will?
Absolutely. So the way in which the ragging is decided is on a KPI by KPI basis.
And Rachel?
Thank you. I had a point of detail, if that's all right, Chair. Well, first, thanks for the report. You know, it is actually very detailed, but I did find it quite easy to navigate and follow. So thank you for that. I think the most striking bit when I was reading through was on page 27, which is the cleaner and greener section, where all the carbon-related metrics are showing as green and also showing as improvements. So we know there's a serious risk around the council's objective to become carbon neutral. So I'd like an explanation as to why we're using KPIs that seem to show quite a rosy picture here. If you look at the detail of that one, so that's on page 41, it also says that the carbon footprint improvements that arise from the council's activity in this area won't show in the numbers until 2022. So can you explain why we have this as a KPI now, and also why it's green?
Specific question about an individual KPI.
Yeah, I did say in my introduction, I did say it was a specific. Yes,
question. We'll come to them shortly.
I said right at the beginning, I've got a point of detail, so
okay,
that's why I carried on.
That will respond to that.
So I'm afraid I don't have the details on that particular set of KPIs, so I'd have to take that away to the service specifically.
And now, Jim.
Or Paul. First, Will, thank you very much, because it's a good step forward in making these reports a lot clearer. The issue I have is that it's still a huge document covering everything. I proposed this when we had the briefing a few days ago. Would it be possible to have each of the directors come and present their KPIs by directorship so we can see it phased across a 12-month period rather than trying to go through all of these KPIs in one hit? And on each of the directorates, we've got challenges and opportunities. It would be really good to see any actions for improvement that are ongoing, or initiatives that they're taking on, because I know there's a number of initiatives for improvement going on, with some dates against them so we can actually measure improvements.
Well, Will, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I am absolutely furiously scribbling to make sure that I've got the detail on these questions. Thank you, and sorry for the delay. I think that's a very interesting proposal. I can take that away and discuss it with the service leads.
Thank you, Will.
Okay, now I've got Paul again.
Thank you, Paul.
Just remind people, we are on general questions about the presentation.
It is, yeah. It's in response.
Specifics after.
Yeah, it's in response to Will's answer. If it's on a KPI by KPI basis, is that worked out on a percentage basis or on the standard deviation, or what is it? How do you work it out?
Well,
so targets and their RAGs are agreed at a service level rather than by me or by my team. So their targets are set within the service and the RAGs are agreed within their service.
thank you, Rochelle.
Could we have an explanation on each of the ones, how you determine these targets? As you said, each one is different. So how the heck are we going to know if one is green, one is yellow, one is green, or anything, if we don't know how you're determining them? As well as the fact that you've described right now that the directorates determine how well they're doing. Now, isn't that sort of like marking your own homework? or marking your own test, shouldn't it be an independent idea of how well they're doing rather than by the same people who are doing them? Because I don't know anybody would say, oh, I'm doing terribly. Oh, I'm doing amber. No, I'm doing red on a normal basis.
Well, would you like to comment?
I can take that point away and raise it.
And also how each one of these are determined along the way, a guidebook or something like this, rather than, so we have an idea of what you're actually doing, because otherwise it means absolutely nothing to us.
Yeah, so I can have a look at attaching an appendix with the RAG levels for each KPI.
Okay. And lastly, Alison.
Okay, I'd just like to say thank you to Will. I found this new format excellent. Thought it was very informative. And just to add for members that as the new chair of HOSC, I have asked that we will look at the KPIs for adult social care each quarter in our meeting, because I know, having served on children's services ONS, that they dig deep into the KPIs each time, and it's very beneficial. I think it adds value, because here on management, we can't examine all of these. We've got an enormous amount of data and things that that we would like to highlight, and we can't do it in one meeting. So we are going to be looking at the KPIs in HOSC as they do on children's services.
Okay. Right, in that case, I'm going to go through page by page between pages 15 and 22, which are the individual department areas. So if we could just stick to one idea at a time, and if there's anything you want to bring up in the more detailed data, then can you do it at when we get to the relevant page? So starting on page 15, it's actually 16, the quarterly business review. Are there any comments or questions anybody has got on that page, either for this page or any of the more detailed data later on? Sarah?
So it's not necessarily a question on this, it's just a point of clarity. This page doesn't tell us the names of the KPIs, i.e. whether it's a CS, a PG22 or whatever. And it's actually quite difficult to actually, I've written down the ones I want to make comments on based on those figures, and I can't tell what's what on each page. So I'm just wondering if it's worth us actually also going through the KPIs from 24 to 28 as well, where we can actually see them clearly listed. Is that okay? Thanks. It's for a matter of format for this meeting, sorry, not for Will.
Well, do you have any comment on that, or is that okay? Okay, I assume not. So Alison.
Will, in the top 3 opportunities of the quarterly business review, you refer to reopening of the town centre. Which town centre do you mean? We have several in our borough.
Absolutely. I think that's simply a typo. That would be a reopening of town centres. And obviously it leads to the opening up of lockdown. It should be remembered that this report deals with the end of the previous municipal year. So that's up to March. So obviously at the point of this report, we were still absolutely in the depths of lockdown.
Okay, I think it's just important that we remember that Wokeham's not the only town in this borough. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anything on the next page, resources and assets, and it's worth our remarking, I think, the last sentence and the overview, that our PI performance should be considered in the context of this particularly challenging year, whereby some red indicators have been enforced by legislative measures and green indicators achieved despite unprecedented work pressures and economic uncertainty. So can you bear that in mind if you've got any comments on resources and assets? Anyone have a question or a comment? No. In which case, let's move then to page 18, Children's Services. Sarah, did you want to bring up something for Children's Services?
Yes, please. I've already made the first comment, as I said earlier on CS5, if that could go back, please, to the service. The other one was CS2, percentage of child protection visits during the period which were completed to the highest standard. The narrative talks about the non-statutory requirement for 10 working days. And my question is really about the measure here, because is the speed, therefore, having an impact on quality? Because the KPI particularly measures quality rather than speed. So I wonder if we're actually measuring that in the right way. And I wonder, is it really to do with quality, or have we got an issue with poor recording, which we've sometimes had in the past? Maybe that's something that Children's Services could look at in the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you. Will, do you have a comment on that?
Nothing beyond, I will take it back to the service.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on Children's Services? In which case, let's move to Adult Social Care and Health. Any questions or comments on that page? Right, then Place and Growth, page 20. Michelle?
Yes, the first of the challenges says that emerging Tory planning reforms, which is unclear how it will affect the council ability to retaining control of local development post 2024. First of all, the planning reforms are in the Queen's speech, so they're expected to go to Parliament this year. Second of all, one of the proposals that was not removed was how our local plan update would have to be in sync with their rules if it's gone within a year of the time that it passes. So most likely it will affect us very directly. And we're going to have to change a lot of the things we're doing, including the local plan update, which we haven't actually finished because of COVID partially, and partially because of political reasons, shall we say. I don't know exactly why it hasn't been finished, but we've met once since last June.
Will, do you have a comment?
No, I don't think so. I think that I can take those comments away to the team and to Steve. But I think that's the challenge, is that we don't know the direct impact of that legislation until it's passed through the central government.
But we have seen the proposals, and some of the proposals were removed and some weren't. And we have a pretty good idea of which ones were. If you look to the LGA, they can probably tell you.
Of course.
Okay. And Sarah?
Thank you. Some points, I guess, if you could send these back to the directorate, please. And some of them I'm repeating from last time, but I've not had a response on any of them. Just to reiterate what Rachel was saying on PG22 about the carbon footprint. Actually, what we got back from the Department for Base was we actually achieved a quarter of what we were supposed to do. So I don't quite understand how that's green. What would be really helpful on that particular KPI is to list out, we know what we're aiming for in 2030, carbon neutrality. So it'd be good to actually list out the target for each of the years up to that point over the next 10 years or however long it is we've got left. And they're set out in advance. So they're not set after we've got our figures. The PG25, it's called carbon offsetting for Wokingham Borough, but it's actually sequestration. Carbon offsetting is something different, so that needs to be renamed. PG26, the air quality. I wonder if we could find out, it looks like single monitors are being used rather than an average of the monitors. So these are in the air quality management areas. And it looks like the readings, if I look at what it says for Twyford in 2018, it says monitor installed in January 2019. But there have been loads of monitors there for years and years and years because it's an AQMA. As such, if we're basing this information on a single monitor, that is not reflective of what we're actually seeing. And I'd rather see this KPI taking an average of all the nitrogen dioxide monitors in the area and taking that average reading, which will give us a much better indication of what's going on there. The PG2, the new home survey. I hadn't realised this wasn't just about homes, but also about infrastructure, and just a question to the committee. But the narrative under this one states that it's not just about the new homes, but the amenities in the area as well, that people haven't been so happy with. So I wonder if that's something we might want to look at as a committee. The PG3 and PG4, I don't believe these are smart measures, and they should be smart. PG15, adults who walk, cycle at least once a week. You'll probably remember last time I actually put up a diagram, because the KPI doesn't demonstrate habitual walking and cycling for travelling. If you increase the amount of people who cycle at least once a week, but the people who cycle or walk 5 times a week decreases, it's a net loss. And as we actually saw in the Department for Transport data, we've actually got a net loss. So it's being measured as green when we actually should be red, because we're not measuring the correct thing there. And finally, PG16, which is enabling sustainable travel, is completely focused on greenways, which is leisure travel. And I don't see a KPI in here for utility travel. And those are the journeys that replace current car journeys. That's the data that we need. I did put this forward in the February meeting, and I emailed it after the meeting, and I haven't seen any change. So could I not only have that sent over to the directorate, but could I actually have a response from them as well as to whether they're going to actually take this on board, please, for future? Thank you.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'll take that back to the directorate.
Thank you, Will. Alison?
I mean, looking at PG15 that Sarah just referred to, this isn't a local data. It's about people in the southeast. So I don't quite see the point in even having this in here if it doesn't tell us about our borough, which is what we're concerned with.
Will, do we need that?
I would need to refer to my notes, but I think some of these KPIs will be removed as part of the review for Q1, and this might be one of them, but I can't be sure. But obviously, when we bring that report forward, you'll see the KPIs we've removed and retired, and some commentary around that.
Yeah, I think if we've got data about our borough, then that would be really useful. But I'm not quite sure how we're going to record how many people are, cycling or walking who didn't used to every quarter. That seems sort of quite impossible to achieve.
Okay, thank you. And Sam?
Hi, so on for place and growth page, I'm looking at the stat which says planning application number 73% higher in Jan to March 2021 than same period 2020. I'd quite like to see that split between what were the new planning applications for, say, the new homes versus someone who, say, just getting an extension done on the house they live in.
Well,
I will ask the service to get that detail if we have it.
thank you very much. Rochelle?
PG3, local plan update. Again, a lot of these things are saying amber. I would call them red, actually, because we don't actually have a local plan update available at this point. We do, due to the problem with Gravesley, the whole plan has been thrown out and has to be completely redone. So therefore, there is no way that you can have anything green, amber, or anything, considering we're several years behind on most of these at this point. Now, Gravesley was nothing that we had control over. That was an MOD problem, that the reason for that. So, but it's still not happening yet. We have to do something, and trying to suddenly all put it into one quarter and to push it through without actually completely considering all the implications of some of the things you're trying to do and the ramifications of changing everything. I don't think we're going to get it through for this year. It's lucky if we get it through for next year, truthfully, at the rate we're going. So that's definitely in the red level, not amber in any way, shape, or form.
I think that's a truism, Rochelle. Are there any more comments on that page? In which case, we'll look at communities' insight and change. Paul?
Thank you. I refer to page 37, Will, CIC8, number of fly tipping incidents. The graph covers 2017-18 through to 2020-21. And it's a steady increase from 2017 to 2018. And then suddenly in the middle of 2019-2020, it goes up quite rapidly. And there's some arbitrary target of 600 been chosen as a target for 2020-21, making it look like it's good. and the RAG status is given a green. Yet it clearly isn't. And Wokingham Borough is suffering more fly tipping than it's ever done in its history of this graph. And what's really needed is a target based on the last 3 years. So it's more in line with what's happened beforehand. So would you agree that this is an absolutely arbitrary 600 that's been thrown in there? Because you've got a green status when we've got the worst fly tipping we've ever had.
I doubt it's arbitrary, but I'll let Will respond to that.
So I'm afraid I don't have any of the detail on the specifics of the fly tipping KPI or its specific target, but I will go back to the service and ask for a response to that.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you. Just 2 KPIs on this section. Firstly, CIC 16, stage 1, number of stage 1 complaints received. The narrative below talks about how 20% of the complaints were housing maintenance related and talks about that, but doesn't say anything about the other 80%. It also doesn't tell us the outcomes. I mean, people can put in stage 1 complaints and they can be genuine and a lot of them won't be. But the other aspect of this is stage 2 complaints and the amount that are actually going to the Ombudsman as well. And I think we need to see that data as well to get a true reflection of what is going on. The other one is CIC 9, number of resident subscribers to Wokingham Borough Connect, and CIC 10 with the social media impressions, engagement and followers. These are not applicable, they say. I'm assuming it's because they're not smart and we're supposed to have smart targets. So I'm hoping that when we look at the KPIs, if they are going to remain, a smart measure is put in place, please.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Okay. RA5A on page 35, among other things, the reason that we were doing much better was because the government was preventing evictions. And since the evictions have been allowed now, and the landlords have been doing some of them, even not necessarily while they were allowed, how is that affecting those numbers? It seems like our numbers should be worse, not better because of that. Unless we're suddenly preventing the landlords from evicting here and the rest of the country isn't.
I guess the answer is because these pieces of data are 3 months old, but I'll let Will respond to that one.
Again, I'm afraid I don't have the specific details on this KPI, so I'll have to go back to the service and ask them.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure Will's taken on board all of the points that have been raised, so thank you very much indeed for all of that. We now need to just note the report, and thanks again for Will for the work that you're doing on this. Right, well, now then we move to item 7, the climate change report. This is on page 53. There's a summary of progress on pages 53 to 62, and then more detailed progress on the strategic plan on pages 103 to 124. So these are really the pages that we need to concentrate on. I'm going to ask Gregor if he'll give a short introduction and then ask if anybody's got any questions for Gregor. Gregor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the members as well for giving me the time to come along and speak tonight. It's hugely appreciated. Thank you for taking the time to read the reports as well that have been put in front of you. I really appreciate that as well. I will just give you a very quick overview introduction to the papers that you have in front of you, and then I'll gladly take your questions. I also have Rhiannon Hayes and Diana Tover, the 2 principal climate emergency officers, with me here tonight. And so between the 3 of us, hopefully we'll be able to give you the answers to all of the questions that you've got. In summary of the quarterly report that you've got in front of you, despite the impact that COVID has clearly had on council operations, we've still been able to make some significant progress forward in our climate emergency action plan. Some of the key highlights for me, we've won over £1.5 million worth of funding from external bodies, be that in terms of active travel from DEFRA, from an organisation called Salex, who are helping us with energy efficiency, and also from the Woodland Trust in our tree planting goals, which is an absolutely fantastic vote of confidence in what we're trying to do and working with our climate emergency action plan. We've taken some big steps forward in terms of the specific actions. So as a summary, 2 park and rides have begun construction across the borough. We've done the EV charging strategy survey, which has gone out to residents for their input and insight, and that's now being worked through, and a detailed strategy is being formed as a result of it. We've had the money from DEFRA for the Air Quality Action Fund, which has funded a specific officer within the council, which is enabling us to work on things like behaviour change, and hopefully some of those things you should have seen within the community already, particularly the air quality banners that have been put up that were designed by our school children. We've also been invited to join the Adept live trial, which is being run out of Reading University, of a multitude of boroughs across Berkshire, to look at air quality, and that's come with additional funding, with additional air quality monitoring, which is absolutely fantastic because it's live. It's being run out of the UOR, and it's being able to show us a lot of different information in terms of the air quality across our borough and where we need to focus our efforts. Our planning application has gone in for the solar farm in Barkham, and I know that's going to committee shortly, and so I won't discuss it in a huge amount of detail to avoid any potential for prejudice. We've set up the Community Energy Fund, which will have its first meeting very shortly. The eco plan, the eco funding that I announced at the tail end of last year has benefited 482 houses across our borough, installing cavity wall insulation, loft insulation to improve energy efficiency and bring down people's heating bills and carbon footprint as a direct result. We've retrofitted schools. We've added solar to Addington. There is a house over near Risley, which has become the test bed for our climate emergency action update in our housing revenue accounts. So the 2,500 social and council homes that the council owns, we've got a test bed. It's live. There are people living in it. I went to see it a couple of weeks ago. The impact that it's having on them and on their energy bills and their carbon efficiency is absolutely fantastic. We started work on the waste strategy. The green bags have rolled out across the borough, as have food waste bags as well, to help bring that food waste recycling figure up. We've had drop-in sessions for the town and parish councils to inform them and allow them to speak directly to officers about the different projects that they're working on and how the town and parish councils can benefit from them. We've launched climate conversations with our business community as well. And this morning I was speaking with others to the Built Environment Network about the update to the Carnival Hub. So there's lots of things being going on. There's lots of things planned for the next 3 months and beyond. I'm more than happy to take any questions that you might have in terms of what's been presented. And I know Diana and Rihanna here as well, and we'll be more than happy to try and answer the questions between us.
Thank you very much, Gregor. That's really interesting to see what's been done so far. But have members got any questions on progress to date? I've got Jackie, Paul, Norman, Rochelle, Rachel. That's all of you. I'll get to all of you in turn, starting with Jackie.
Thank you. The quarterly highlight report talks about an electric vehicle charging point survey. Will the results of this survey be feeding into a bigger electric vehicle charging strategy?
Thank you for that, Jackie. Yes, it will. So the survey went out to residents in Q1 of this year, I believe. The results have come back in. They've been tabulated, and officers are now working through what our plans are for the EV charging strategy, which will hopefully be launched later on this year, either via council or through the executive.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me just check that I've got everybody who had their hand up. I've got now Paul, Norman, Sam, Rochelle, Rachel, Sarah, and Alison. Is there anybody else that wanted to speak? Sorry. Okay, I've got the other Rachel, Guy,
Everybody.
and Jim. I know that's everybody, but I'm trying to take you in a reasonable order, in which case I saw you. Okay, thank you. Right, Paul.
Thank you, Pauline. Good evening, Gregor. Page 53, the sustainable active travel. The first 3 bullet points cover the active travel fund, tranche 2, And the statement here seems to give the impression that all three schemes could be designed and constructed, but the funding awarded by DfT doesn't actually even cover one of the schemes. It would mean that 2.5 schemes approximately would then drop into the LC WIP. The schemes have got to be designed and completed, whatever part of that scheme, by 31st of March 2022. So it's got to be constructed. So it's going to be pretty tight, but the statement there is not really what is actually going to happen. That's my concern on that, because it's only part of the scheme. On page 53 as well, the California Greenway, I understood that was spring 2020 because I went down there a year ago. It seems to give the impression it was this year. And on page 48, it indicates, whereas previously on one of the previous ones, the Greenway was completed this year, 700 metres of surfaced in Cantley Park. So it doesn't refer to that particular one. Page 53 as well, Copy Beach Park and Ride, the 250 space Copy Beach Park and Ride is due to start construction shortly. Estimated cost of 3.1 million. Business case assumes 95% occupancy of the car park, costing £1 per day. Then there's the cost of a bus as well to go in there. That's circa 100,000. In-depth study of 8 park and rides in the UK indicated all of them were a financial drain on the authority, with the exception of one. And a conclusion that urban fringe bus based car park and ride, such as this one, provided with a dedicated bus service, was described as a policy of car traffic redistribution rather than a policy of car traffic reduction. Would you agree with that? Finally, the attraction of this park and ride is particularly weak in the business case. I've read it a few times, and it is an if, and a big if customers did come from the town centre, which is what's indicated in the business case. Will there be a parking review in the town centre of car parks? Thank you.
Right, quite a series of questions, Gregor. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you for them, Paul. Some very detailed questions there, and some of which I will be completely open and honest and say I'm going to have to pass over to the highways team specifically to answer. One point that I would make in terms of what you said is the biggest thing that we can do in terms of climate change is to drive behaviour change. And to be able to do that for transport in an area where we have some of the highest car ownership in the country, we need to start solving for the reasons why people are moving around our borough. So we have to try and find solutions to the fact that people are commuting, that they're trying to go to and from the station, that they're trying to go to and from the shops, that they're doing the school run. These are the primary missions that people are using when they're commuting and when they're travelling across our borough. And once we've identified what those things are, we have to then try and find other solutions to encourage people to do it differently. Sorry, I'm being attacked by my cat. The simple case here is we have to start putting in place different means and different measures to get people to travel separately. Now, park and ride is one of them. I wasn't a part of the council when the park and ride was originally discussed. I have read through the business case. It's in my ward. It's in Norries, one of them anyway. I think we have to start with an open mind and say, this is a way of changing the way that people move around our borough. This is a way of solving some of the reasons why people are travelling across our borough. We're going to need to find other measures as well. And that's going to be in terms of greenways. It's going to be in terms of cycleways. It's going to be in terms of new technologies that at the moment aren't financially viable for us, but hopefully will become so in the near future. So I think we've got to look at everything. We've got to look at everything with an open mind. And we've got to try and drive that behaviour change as a result.
Do Diane or Rhian have anything to add to that?
I would say that we definitely have to take this back to our colleagues in transport, and we just definitely note some of those comments that have been made. So you know, when we have an opportunity afterwards, we'll come back with a response for those.
Thank you. Might you be able to email that response to all of us?
Yeah,
Over the next
absolutely.
few
We'll,
days? That'd be good.
yeah, we'll collate them all. If someone's got those questions and they send them to us, we'll collate the answers for you.
Thank you very much. Norman.
Pauline, I do have more questions, but do you want to move on to somebody else and come back to me afterwards?
How many more?
About 6, 7.
We'll come back to you. Norman.
Yes, thank you very much. There's clearly a lot of work in here, which is great, Gregor. And it's really linking into something you said about behaviour change. There's a lot of engagement here with various groups, the town and parish councils, various trusts and schools getting work in home. I just wonder how you're going to engage other parts of our local community, specifically local businesses, in trying to help us reach these targets. I think we need to share it out. Everyone needs to be part of it. Thanks.
Gregor.
Thank you, Norman. It's a really interesting point. I don't know if you're aware of this, but just before the elections this year, Diana Tova organised something called Climate Conversations, and it was our first attempt at engaging our local business community and talking to them directly about climate change, and talking to them about the role that Working Borough Council is going to play in reducing the carbon footprint and understanding what some of those different businesses are doing and sharing some best practice in terms of what different businesses could do. What became really apparent to me in hosting that event and listening to the 4 speakers talk was that actually there's a lot of businesses working on sustainability across our borough already. There is a lot of businesses that want to work on sustainability across our borough, particularly in the post-COVID world, but don't really know where to start. And there's a lot of confusion in terms of what they should be doing, what they should be measuring and where they can go. And I think there is a fantastic role that the council can play in supporting our business community and developing that. We have started up opening channels to our businesses across our borough. We started speaking to them about how they can reduce road miles and how they can not require staff to start coming back into the office 5 days a week, if that's what they used to do, but potentially adopting and retaining some of the home working standards that have become such a mainstay for everybody in the last 18 months. We're talking to them, and I spoke at a business event before COVID about things like reducing packaging, reducing road miles, reducing energy, and looking at the energy bills and picking specific targets that are easily actionable by businesses as a starting point, and then working towards them. And I think one of the other things that we've got to recognise is that in reducing the carbon footprint of our community, it's not just in the hands of Woking Borough Council. A large chunk of our carbon footprint comes from the businesses in our community, and we need to work with them and help them to reduce their carbon footprint in order to bring down the total carbon footprint of our borough. So I think you rightly highlight that there is an opportunity, that there is something that we need to do to engage businesses more. I'm completely open to ideas. I've already started speaking to Stuart Monroe about what we can do as well. And I know Rianne has had a lot of conversations with local businesses, and we're looking at different ways that we can engage them and bring them together. Perhaps Rianne might have something specific that she wants to add as well.
Thanks, Gregor. Yeah, one of our key aims in terms of economic development is to try and engage with all of our businesses in the borough in the coming year. And there are a number of agendas on which we can really engage with them, in which they're really interested, and as Gregor said, where we can really help them improve their performance. And in some cases, they can help us as well. What we're going to go out and talk to all of them about climate emergency. Obviously, we'll be talking to them about other issues such as COVID and health and well-being, but it's certainly going to be the core issue that we're engaging with them going forward. So we're hoping to get lots of feedback from business over the coming 12 months.
Thank you. Sam.
Hello. Hi, Gregor. So my question is, while WBC have seen the second highest increase in recycling in the last year, can you please tell us what work is being done to improve this figure even more?
Thank you for that, Sam. Yeah, you're absolutely right. When I read that as well, and I was hugely proud to be part of the borough that has delivered that. But we can't rest on the laurels. As part of the Climate Emergency Action Plan, we've set a target of getting our recycling level to 70%. The 70% isn't just an arbitrary figure, by the way. I should explain that there are certain elements within our current waste stream that currently we can't recycle. For example, nappies and sanitary products and ashes. There's no market for them, and animal waste. And they make up a sizable portion of our waste stream at the moment, and we currently don't have a recycling path for them. So getting to 70% is a aspirational target, but based on what some experts are telling us, is a direction that we should be going in. But more importantly for us as a borough actually is reducing the amount of waste that we generate in the first place. So it's a really simple fact that even if we get to 70% recycled over the next 10 or 15 years, if we double the amount of waste that we throw out overall, that amount of recycling will be irrelevant. We need to reduce the amount of waste that we generate overall. We've started working on a waste strategy. That waste strategy will be launched in the coming months by Parry Bath as part of the environmental portfolio. We have the RE3 board tomorrow where this will be discussed as well. One of the key targets that we're setting ourselves as a council is to start working on how we reduce the total amount of waste that we generate as a community. We average quite sizable weight of waste as a community each over the course of a year. We need to get some ownership over reducing those targets overall, reducing that waste overall, sorry, I should say, and then recycling what is remaining within our waste stream. So work is ongoing, and yeah, RE3 is going to be a key partner in that for.
Thank you, Gregor.
Thank you. Rochelle.
On page 53, you mentioned that the Greenwich Triangle Park and Ride began construction in February 2021. I'd like to ask you how that actually occurred, since I've walked by it with my dog every day and nothing at all has happened there. And after speaking to a number of the bus drivers, one of the things is that most of the people weren't using the park and ride nor the trains at that point, and it was a really good time to do that, as well as the fact that saving money from the government who were paying construction workers furlough. So why wasn't it started, and when is it going to start? Because the uptake on the park and ride is increasing again, and the trains. When are you planning on starting?
Good question, Gregor.
I will have to refer you to the colleagues in highways on that one, Rochelle. I don't have a specific answer for you.
Because we really do need to have it done now, not later, because it's the time to do it at this point. The question is, what's stopping it from happening, and what can we do to prevent those problems from occurring and get it done?
Gregor, could you possibly could you find out the answers to that? And I think it would be useful if you could circulate it to all of us, because well, I think a lot of us use the park and ride, not just people in.
And the progress on possibly including a park and ride up to the Crossrail station as well.
Okay.
I will speak to the colleagues in highways and I'll get an answer for everybody.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. Now, you described in your introduction to this that this was a summary of progress, but I think what we actually have here is a very, very detailed list of actions. I'm sure most of these are great in their own rights, but my main response when I look through it is, so what? What is the impact of all of these actions? There's quite a lot of low-level actions as well, but what is the overall impact on the carbon savings, which is what we're all really interested in. I think moving to the detail table towards the end, there's no indication of the progress that we're making against our main overall objective of saving carbon. Often the carbon savings aren't even quoted here. When they are, it's not clear whether it's per annum or over a longer period. But I think perhaps more importantly is that the actual progress that we're making or that we plan to make in saving carbon is just not really clearly shown. So I can see lots of actions. I can see a risk rating for those actions, but I can't see the key thing that, you know, whether we're on target for our carbon reduction or not. Just also on the RAG rating, you know, each item is RAG rated, which is useful to a certain extent, but we're actually comparing actions of very different sizes of outcome. So you might have a very small action that's, say, classed as green, and you might have a very large saving of carbon that's classed as red. But, you know, at a glance, there's no overall indication of the scale of each of those outcomes. I think the prime example of that would be the green bank. So the failure of that scheme, you know, that's red as it should be, but that's got a really big impact on our ability to meet our overarching objectives here. But the report doesn't really bring that out. Also, a point of detail on that particular thing, I can see that the saving figures for that item are still included in the report, but legal have said, you know, we're not doing that. So I don't understand why they're still there. And also, so this is on page 116, and then there's an item 17.2 just underneath that, which has exactly the same carbon savings as the green bank, but it's a different project. So I'm confused as to how that sort of stacks up. And then just a final point before I kind of sum up, I would note there's a whole section here on communication and engagement, and obviously that is really important, but there aren't any measurable carbon savings in that section. And I don't really think it's necessary to produce all the press releases for us. I think that's quite a distraction, or it can be. You know, there's one on badges in there. I'm sure we all love badges, but let's not be distracted from what our real aim is here, and that's saving carbon. So I think to sum up, in terms of my questions, it would be, why don't we have a column in the detail table that clearly shows the latest projections for carbon saving for each element with a total at the end? Why isn't there a sort of overall summary in the report that shows the level of carbon that needs to be saved and our projected progress against that? So I think without that, we can't really scrutinise this properly. We can ask detailed questions about specific points, but in terms of our objective, we can't really scrutinise it. And then more specifically, I'd like an answer about the green bank point and why the savings are still in there, and point 17.2, how that sort of stacks up, please.
Welcome.
What I'd say in response to your question, Rachel, and there's some very fair points in there, is that we're working from data from the government that's 2 years old. So right now, the data that we have in terms of our carbon footprint is based on statistics, facts, figures that we submitted in 2018, 2019. And so we're always running in arrears. We can't see the physical impact that we've had on our carbon footprint overall until the government's data catches up with the actions that we have put in place. That's a challenge for us. We can make estimates, we can make assumptions in terms of the impact that each one of our actions is having. But until the government's data catches up with where we are, we're never going to be able to truly see the impact, the actual impact that we have had. The other thing that I'd say is that the projects that are going to deliver the biggest carbon savings for us, things like the solar farms, they're not possible to do them in an instant. Things like changing to planning guidance going forward, we can't do them in an instant. They take long times to work through, to understand the full detail, the ramifications of all of the decisions that are being made, and to do them properly. Those projects are now coming to the fore. They're the ones that you'll see going forward in the next year, 18 months. You'll start seeing these projects coming into the list of things that we're doing and the actions that we are taking in terms of live projects. But for the last 2 years, most of them have been in the planning phase, or we haven't been able to do them because of timings and other things like the local plan update. In terms of the specific details within the report, Diana, Rhian, and I will meet after this session. We can go through the specific items that you've raised. If there is anything that is a duplication, then yes, of course, we will take it out. We're not trying to double count on anything. We have to be realistic. So we will take those points on board and we will action them accordingly if there is double counting involved. Rhian, is there anything that you want to add?
Yes, and I thought really good points as well. This is essentially a highlight report, so it's just a sort of a moment in time across the year. So the main report is coming to council in July, and that will have far more detail and set out the progress that we've actually made. And as Gregor has said, very much reliant on the information that we get from government, but that will have a lot more detail. We do 3 of these particular reports per year, and we've brought the latest one to this meeting. But the key one will be the one that goes to the to council in July.
If I could just briefly come back on those points. Thank you for your answers. I would say, this is a plan for 2030. There is, I appreciate that the savings haven't been made yet and the measurement problems with the time lag, of course. But this is a plan looking ahead for 2030. So things like the Green Bank, we need to know what the impact of that is and what else we should be doing to replace it, very urgently. So we can project, we can do targets and estimates. They're not going to be perfect, but we need something. And then just one other point I noticed in the report we're coming on to next, which is the task and finish report, that the report from 2020, there is a specific recommendation in there, which is that we would include an assessment methodology which measures the likelihood as a percentage of success or failure for each item. So that's the kind of thing I'm sort of getting at. What can we say, right, the total carbon is this, we're expecting to make a saving of X percent of that. So that was a recommendation back from 2020. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Ray. Sarah.
Thank you. I've got a little comment and then 2 lines of inquiry. The little comment is target 1.3 byways resurfacing programme, Doles Lane. Doles Lane was resurfaced before I even contemplated being a councillor. So I don't know why that's in there, nothing to do with the Climate Emergency Action Plan. The 2 things I wanted to go down. Firstly, there are several actions from the original action plan that are missing from this update here. Little examples, target 36, procurement, completely gone. Targets 18, 19, 20 and 21, all relating to sequestration, low intensity land management, etc., all gone. 5.4, workplace EV schemes, gone. 7.6 and 7.7, which are promoting EV to local businesses and residents, gone. 8.1, 100% of council car fleets being ultra low emission by 2028, gone. There's loads of them. So my first query is, why have they gone? What's happening? And obviously they had carbon savings related to them. So have they been accounted for elsewhere? And because we can't see them in this report, we don't know. My second line of inquiry, I have raised this and I have sent over the analysis over to officers about this. And this is about the gap in the plan from the council's initial assumption that national policy and nationally led decarbonisation will result in a reduction of CO2 emissions, which is around double the amount Department for Base is modelling. And this would mean approximately 24% of the borough's carbon emissions don't have any active mitigation measures to reduce them assigned to them. So what measures are being taken to deal with this? Because that is a substantial amount to miss by. Thank you.
Very good. Couple of questions there.
Yeah, I'll deal with them in order. To your first point, as Rhiannon has just said, this is a highlight report. This isn't a detail of where we are with each specific point of action on the Climate Emergency Action Plan. This is a highlight report of things that have been delivered between January and March and things that are planned from April through to the end of June. So it won't go into details around things like the procurement strategy because that piece of work is ongoing at the moment but hasn't been delivered yet. When it has been delivered, it will come into the highlight report that will be sent across by Rhiannon and by the rest of the team. So you can't expect details on absolutely everything. And in terms of the second point that you've raised there, Sarah, yes, there is a gap in our plan. And as strange as this may seem, I do sometimes find it quite reassuring that there's a gap in our plan. I've worked in commercial industries for quite some time, over 20 years now. And I'm always really concerned when somebody presents me a plan 12 months in advance that says that they're going to hit their target absolutely perfectly without a penny over or a penny below. I always find that really concerning, let alone 10 years out. We've always said this is a living document. Things are going to come into it. Things are going to drop out of it. That's the way it's going to be. Programs are going to live and breathe. Some will over-deliver versus expectations. If you look at things like the solar farm and the capacity of solar farm that we were originally planning for that site, it has increased ever since the plan for that project started being thought through. The capacity of energy that we're going to be able to deliver has increased as a result. So These things are going to live and breathe. That's the way this is going to happen. Yes, it's concerning that there are elements of our plan that we might not have control over, but we've taken most of them out. Things like the carbon footprint from the motorway or the carbon footprint from the railways, because we just don't have control over them. There are other things that are going to come into our net benefit as well. So central government has announced that by 2030, every home in the country is going to be powered by offshore wind, which would have a fantastic positive impact on our carbon footprint and would reduce it significantly as a result. And that hasn't been factored in to our plans so far. I was listening to somebody today while I was at the Built Environment Network conference who said that by 2025, we will have a fully net zero carbon grid at times in the UK. Now, at times basically means when it's just domestic properties that are using it and not businesses massively drawing down on it at that point in time. But that in itself will have a huge benefit for us that will come at next to no cost to us as a borough. Yes, we will still build our solar farms because it's important that we do that. But there are benefits to be had from other parts of the national and global challenge on carbon and climate emergency that we can benefit from. And as they come through and as they come to reality, we will factor them into our calculations, and that will help us get us to our target, hopefully faster, hopefully ahead of 2030, but certainly in line with it. Brianne, do you want to add anything?
Hi. I was just going to reiterate the part about it being a highlight report, Sarah, and that we don't have all of the actions in there, just the ones that we're reporting on during this quarter. So yeah, very much things like procurement are still going on, and they will all be in the climate emergency action plan, which we brought to executive in July. Sorry, Diana, did you want to say something?
No, I just was going to say exactly what Brianne you just said.
Thank you. Could I just come back on a couple of things there briefly? I mean, I appreciate that this is a highlight report, but there are things in this report that aren't from this quarter. So target 4.3 says this programme will be put on hold and reviewed in 2 years' time. 4.11, this is now planned for 2021-22. So there are things in there, which is what led me to question why other things aren't in there. So yeah, there's not much consistency there. Just and very specifically on the second question, which is about the projected reduction through no action, showing that 24% gap. In the report we get to council in July, are we going to see that corrected to reflect what the Department for Base is actually projecting?
Who's going to answer that?
Well, in terms of the first comment, I just wanted to say if we gave some update was because something was being developed and then stopped, and that's why it's there. But all the actions that we initially put in the plan will be in the annual report, or there will be an explanation of why they've been removed, which is what we also try to do in the quarterly reports.
Thank you. Alison.
So I didn't get an answer to my second query.
Which was?
In the report that comes to council in July, are we going to have the trajectory from no action, i.e. policy from national government, is it going to be corrected to reflect the projections from Department for Base?
So there has been a lot of changes in national policy over this year. And there are a lot of new commitments, but we don't actually have a clear understanding at this point of how they will reflect it in the trajectory of carbon emissions. But as information is being released, we will be able to update that data.
Okay, I sent a document with that information that you can refer to. Thank you.
Right, Alison.
Thank you. Gregor, you've spoken previously about local deliberative processes and your desire to engage our residents more in our climate emergency plan. Can you give members an update on what local deliberative process has been considered, when the council are likely to begin conducting them, And what subjects are likely to be considered by those participating?
Yes, I have spoken about local deliberative processes on many occasions in the past, both in response to questions from yourself and from others, and also in the council chamber as a result of motions. I've said all along I'm more than happy to do local deliberative processes. I was reluctant to commit to doing a citizens' assembly because we hadn't gone away and done the research and understood what the other types of local deliberative process were and what opportunities, what costs and what type of feedback and insight we'd be able to get as a result of them would be. That piece of work has been done now. It's been done by Diana and a member of the climate team. It is an absolutely fantastic piece of work. It benchmarks all of the different types of local deliberative process as listed by a couple of experts in the field and assesses them against our climate emergency, against our requirements, against the type of information and insight we would need, the type of support that we would need from our residents, and also the cost and the speed at which they could be done. That piece of work will be released, I believe, to the executive in the form of a paper in the coming months. And then I would propose coming back to probably full council with a recommendation in terms of the areas that we would want to be looking at and the types of local deliberative process that we would want to use. But just from my thinking, the last Task and Finish group recommended preparing a 2030 vision for the future living of our borough in terms of carbon neutral life. And that would certainly be one of the things that I would like to go to a local deliberative process on and really understand from our residents, having listened to evidence, what vision of future living they think is relevant for our community. I'd like to look at waste. I've already spoken about waste reduction in particular, and I'd like to look at waste and what actions our residents want us to take in terms of waste reduction in particular. I'd like to look at behaviour change because it is the single most important thing that we can do for climate emergency and for combating climate change. And I want to understand from residents what level of receptivity they have to the types of behaviour change that's likely to be required. And there's probably going to be a variety of other things that will come up as well. So from transport and modal shift, which we talked about earlier on today, and how we get people into different types of vehicles and solve for the reasons why they're travelling around our community. And also, just some of the other areas of climate emergency, like energy usage and energy consumption. So there's plenty of opportunity to do it, and there's plenty of different ways that we can go about doing it as well, which is absolutely fantastic. And the key is about understanding which is right for that specific question or for that specific topic area, what's going to get us the broadest level of insight possible, and then what's going to be able to get us the best, most actionable recommendations as a result.
Nice. The other Rachel.
Do you mean Rebecca?
I've been away a long time. I know
No
Rebecca
problem.
really well.
No problem. Thank you, Gregor. I've got a couple of questions about the proposed Barkham solar farm. So there've been some claims locally that residents have raised that the solar farm isn't worth building because it can only save 1% of our carbon footprint. Is that true? Also, it's been claimed that the energy that the Barkham solar farm will generate will not actually benefit local residents. Could you clarify that for me as well? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Some very good and quite challenging questions there. So on the first one, yeah, the solar farm will save about 1% of our carbon footprint every year. So at the moment, it's forecast for about 36 megawatt peak, which means it will generate electricity for between 4 and 5, maybe 6,000 houses. That represents 1% of our carbon footprint. Now, you could argue that because it's only 1%, it's not worth doing. The kind of counter argument to that is, well, Woking Borough represents less than 1/4 of 1,000th of 1% of the global carbon footprint. So if we're not going to do a solar farm because it's only going to reduce 1% of our carbon footprint, then really we probably shouldn't do anything because it's not going to impact on the global carbon footprint. The problem with that argument is that it's just not right. We have to take responsibility for the carbon that we generate. We have to take steps and actions to reduce our carbon footprint and to have a more positive impact on the planet for our future generations, and also for ourselves and for our own quality of life. I genuinely believe that. The solar farm is one way of reducing our carbon footprint and taking more control over our energy generation and distribution to our residents. I think it's a fantastic initiative to move forward with, but I do understand why it's controversial with some people. In terms of the second question that you asked, it comes down to how energy is sold around the UK. Because as strange as this may seem, it doesn't matter what energy tariff you are on. You get the same energy as your next door neighbour. So I get my energy from Kpis energy, and so my carbon, my energy is on a reduced carbon tariff. My next door neighbour doesn't. He gets his from SSE. He may pay more than me, he may pay less than me. That's kind of irrelevant. We both get our electricity from exactly the same place, and that's the local energy substation. Doesn't matter who we buy it from, the only difference is who's billing us for it. The local energy substation gets its energy from the closest energy source that is online at that moment in time, which means if you live closest to a coal-fired power station, you're getting your energy from the coal-fired power station, whether you're buying it from Kpis Energy or not. And this is called the fungibility of energy. Energy is not a fungible commodity. Everybody gets the same energy regardless of who they buy it from, because it all gets delivered from the nearest local source. From that perspective, yes, we will be providing energy to the national grid, but we'll be providing it from Barkham Farms to the nearest energy substation, which is in Arborfield. And so from there, it will go out to all of the local houses on demand. That's how our national energy grid works. We don't have a local grid, we've got a national one. And so, even though we're selling the energy to the national grid for use, our local houses will benefit from it because every house gets its energy from the local energy substation, which gets it from the nearest online energy source.
Okay, thank you very much. And now, Guy.
Thank you, Chair. I think the best way of describing this report is from the smallest acorns can grow the mightiest oaks. This is very much a status report and basically understanding what we're doing, going from the little things, building up to the big things. And I quite liked reviewing this and actually seeing that there is actions being done rather than some lip service being made. And you've also got the added effect of a lot of these schemes are going to take time. We are effectively planting some acorns here to make oaks, to get the carbon reductions, etc. We're investing for the future here in this regard. Now, there's a couple of questions I've got because there's been some changes and it picks up on a previous question that's been made as well. And that's regarding the Green Homes grant, because that effectively failed from my interpretation of that from central government point of view, mostly due to the fact it felt incredibly bureaucratic and clunky to do it. I know that we were involved in this as working borough council. Was this a successful element for our residents? And I know we've also got some grants that we took from that with Bracknell Council as well to support some of our, I believe it was, I can't remember if it was low income households or the council house stock as well. So have we been able to take advantage of that fully? What actions have been done on that? And also, with the Green Homes grant going away, can the Green Bank be looked at again? Because I still think that is one of the most innovative ideas that this council's had in many years. I can understand the logic of it basically being, as was previously pointed out, a red status because of the government grants. But with that now being axed, is it going to be looked at again? I think that'll do a start to 10.
Thank you, Guy. Gregor?
Thank you, Guy. So the Green Home Grants phase 1, yeah, you're absolutely right. It hasn't been a huge success nationally, mainly because there was a lot of applications for the Green Home Grants. I put one in myself. There wasn't enough qualified fitters and engineers and organisations to be able to deliver the work and the type of work to the standard that was required. Yes, we did put in a bid for Green Home Grant funding in partnership with Bracknell. We were awarded some of that funding. Bracknell have been able to make some use of that money, but for us in Woking, it hasn't really been a huge success. At the same time as the Green Home Grants funding, we were allocated funding from the energy company obligation. And that has actually been really successful for us. So you'll see in the highlight report 428 homes across the borough, and it is spread across the borough, retrofitted with cavity wall insulation, with loft insulation as well, which has dramatically reduced the carbon footprint of those homes. It's improved their energy efficiency, reduced their energy bills significantly as well. And what's fantastic about this is it was at zero cost to the residents, but they get all of the benefit from the reduced energy costs, which is money put back into their pockets. And so I'm hugely proud of that. We have put in a bid for what's called Green Home Grant 2. How successful that funding bid will be and what the actions coming out of it at the moment, I personally don't know. Potentially Rhiannon and Diana might, but I can always ask the energy team to refer to that and give you a proper answer in terms of the Green Home Grant phase 2. In terms of the Green Bank, it's a really interesting conversation. So I was involved in a lot of conversations. We were talking to a couple of high street lenders that then went down to one high street lender at the beginning of last year. So from sort of autumn 2019 through to the beginning of 2020. And there was a lot of appetite for what we were trying to do with the Green Home Grant, with the Green Bank. Banks understood that it was a growing part of where the market was going. A lot of banks have offered their own mortgage products that come with some equity release to be able to install solar panels onto the roof of houses, or batteries, or air source heat pumps. So we've seen that within the marketplace already. What happened with that is we've got a certain distance with one of the teams, with one of the high street lenders. They then wanted to get another team involved, and then COVID happened. And at that point, the banks didn't know what the future of the economy was going to be. They didn't know what the future of their business was going to be, and how dramatic the potential recession was going to be, what the impact was going to be on business, what was going to be on mortgage lenders. Lots of people were applying for mortgage holidays, and so a lot of their revenue from the past was drying up. So unsurprisingly, they turned around to us and said, sorry guys, we've got to put these conversations on hold. And I totally accept where they were coming from. I really do, I get it. I agree with you. I think it is one of the game-changing opportunities for our council. It's something that we alone can't afford to do, but we can do in partnership with a major financial institution. Now that we're coming out of the other side of COVID, it is something that I want to revisit. It's a conversation that I will reignite, probably not this year, but the start of next year would be my guess. Just let the rest of COVID play itself out this year. And when we know where the economy is going to be, then we start reapproaching the mortgage lenders and go back into them with the offer again. And hopefully we'll get the same type of reception that we were getting before.
Thank you. And Jim.
Thank you, Chair. Gregor, thank you to you and your team for obviously a huge amount of work. Even just to produce such a highlight report is a lot of effort. So thank you for that. However, earlier on tonight, we spoke about KPIs and how we run as a council. And we spoke at length about how by simplifying some of the reports that we do, we help people to gain focus and understanding of what's actually going on. I think you may like to have a look at some of those things to see if we can actually do that, so we can get a better view of some of the priorities and the indicative timescales of things that are going to be delivered, because I think some of the questions tonight would have been eased if that approach had been taken. A couple of other things, if I can. Waste strategy. I've been working with a group of people and officers for the last year on fly tipping, and we were getting somewhere until the tsunami following COVID came along and knocked that back. I'd like to understand how we can now have a kickstart of different alternatives rather than keep trying to play some of the old cards on changing behaviour to help the officers reduce fly tipping, if you've got anything from the waste strategy on that. I'd like to understand, have we measured through our monitors across Wokingham the impact of COVID on air pollution? Has our air quality increased? And if so, have we measured it, how much by? And finally, we've asked this before, tree protection. The incident in Bearwood, where the Reading Football Club new training ground, we lost a number of trees. That's already gone. There's not a lot we can do about it, but what we can do is to make sure it doesn't happen again, where we lose trees with no obligation on the developers to replace those trees or even over replace those trees so we get more trees.
Gregor?
Thank you, Jim. Some really interesting questions there. On KPIs, I will gladly meet with any member of this committee to talk about KPIs and reducing them or making them more relevant to the future direction of our council and of our climate emergency. You know, Jim, you and I have had a few conversations in the past, particularly around customer service and customer service KPIs. I think you know my view on KPIs being things that we can actually genuinely do something about and that drive action rather than just being there for interest's sake. So I'm more than happy to have a conversation with anybody that wants to around KPIs, and I know both Rhiannon and Diana would gladly join me in that as well, because we want to make sure that the things that we are measuring as relevant to the council as well as relevant to the individual officers who are working on these projects. In terms of fly tipping, the waste strategy that I've been working on hasn't been inclusive of fly tipping. There has been a separate piece of work going on about that. So, you know, from my perspective in relation to fly tipping, I haven't been involved in discussions. I believe John Kaiser has been very heavily, and I'm sure he would welcome your input in terms of fly tipping and what genuine strategies we can put in place to reduce it, because we know there has been an increase in our community recently. In terms of the COVID impact on air quality, yes, there has been. The simple maths is less cars on the road equals better air quality. So I go back to something that I said earlier on, which is we've got to solve the reasons why people are in their cars, driving around and offer them alternatives. But in terms of that impact on air quality, one of the conversations that Rhiannon and I and Diana and I have had on numerous occasions is how we maintain the benefit of air quality going forward, so that you know, we don't go back to previous levels and we continue on a downward spike. A lot of that is going to come down to conversations with people like the businesses, like Norman raised earlier on, talking to them about how we can reduce the number of times people are commuting and driving to and from their work, finding other ways of getting our children to school rather than simply dropping them off in the cars. So there is work going on there. I think the outputs of the Adept Live program as well will be absolutely fantastic for us in terms of showing for us and mapping for us during the course of the day and the week and the month where our air quality issues really genuinely are, so that we can then start taking action on them. And I know when you speak to the highways team going forward, the work that they're doing around congestion monitoring will have some fantastic positive benefits for air quality for our community as well, which is great. I saw a presentation from them yesterday along with some of our members, and it really is quite inspirational, some of the stuff that they're now able to do simply by phasing traffic lights differently and moving people through our borough in slightly more efficient ways, which is fantastic. Tree protection is a really interesting one. So I speak to the Wokingham District Veteran Tree Association on a quite regular basis, and this is something that they raise with us as well. I'm not going to go into the specifics of what happened at Bearwood, because there are some real sort of regulations in terms of conditions as part of that were imposed, and that was the way it was, unfortunately. But going forward, I agree with you in terms of tree protection. One of the key things that we need to do on top of planting 250,000 new trees is to protect the ones that we have. As part of the Woodland Trust funding, we're going to be able to bring in a dedicated tree project officer working within the climate team who will be looking at things like the 250,000 tree planting initiative. And I also know that we're getting some more officers within the planning enforcement team as well, specifically looking around trees and making sure that we can protect them when they become vulnerable. So I think action is being taken on that, Jim, but I know if you've got any additional ideas or things that you'd like to see, the officers would welcome your ideas.
Thank you, Gregor. Just to clarify on the KPI comments, Gregor, it was more about how do we simplify highlight reports and make them more understandable and more readable, because there's so much going on there. It's perhaps a lesson from how we presented KPIs tonight is to try to simplify it if we possibly can.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Sure, thank you.
And now finally back to Paul, and maybe some of your questions have already been asked.
They have, Chair, thank you. Page 56, waste and recycling. The new green sacks do not allow residents to put large cardboard into them because they're unable to fold it. So some of the supermarket locations are seeing a significant increase in cardboard being recycled since we've had the green sacks. What is WBC doing to allow residents to recycle from their doorstep, curbside, rather than travelling by car up to the supermarket and then back to the home? That's my first one. My second one, page 57, I take you back to 19th of September 2019, Gregor, a motion 420, strategy to lower transport emissions, which was agreed by full council. So what is a low carbon transport strategy? Where's that come from? Page 61, the Zebra Fund. As Wokingham Borough do not operate buses, have they made a partnership bid with any bus operator? And if not, why not? Page 106 and 4.4. I don't quite understand the text. Is it comparing September 2020 with 21, or is it 2019? And can we use metric measurements in future? And are these new cyclists or generally existing cyclists being captured in the data? And therefore, there's been no change or uptake in cycling. And if there has been, what proportion of those journeys were originally done by car, which has now been switched to cycling? And page 107, 4.8, it talks about the A329 and the cycle route. It's a fairly poorly designed substandard scheme. It's not complete. There's huge gaps in it. So the statement is really wrong because it's not complete. So the status can't be green. And I certainly wouldn't allow my 12-year-old granddaughter at Bikeability Level 2 to cycle on there on her own. And I'm sure you wouldn't if you've got a 12-year-old son or daughter. Page 111, 6th point down from the top, London Road. The report was released in March 21, and it says that the carbon savings will be available. But what are those carbon savings? And was there a forecast for the future when traffic increases because the capacity has been increased because of the improvements? They're therefore negating any savings. And my final point is also on page 111, 8th point down about the speed limit programme. How can the RAG status be green when phase 2, due for completion in March 2021, hasn't been finished? We're now in June and the A and B road report hasn't been published. Thank you.
Right, Gregor, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. I've been trying to take a note of the questions as we go through. If I miss any of them, then please do just drop me an email and I'll get you and the rest of the committee an answer for them. So in terms of the green bags, large items, there's always been a WBC large item collection facility available, which you can book through the website. So if anybody does have any large cardboard boxes that they can't rip down, or even if you've got a sofa or a garage door, WBC will come and take it away for you. But it would be easier if you could get it to the local recycling centre. Doesn't mean that you've got to do it yourself in a car, but if there is a neighbour going, perhaps you could put your box in with theirs. In terms of the low carbon transport strategy, that is what was agreed by council in the motion that I know you put forward. It may have been termed slightly differently, but that is what the motion was pointing towards. The low carbon transport strategy is what it's currently referred to, although I know you said it was low emissions. In respect to that, that will be available through the council very shortly. I think it's an internal consultation at the moment. I'm sure Rhiannon and Diana might be able to give us a bit more of an update on that. In terms of the buses, there is a paper that goes to executive in the tail end of next week that is specifically around buses and how we start to encourage bus travel and increase bus travel across the community going forward. I'm not going to preempt any of the work that piece of work will do, or try and give an inclination about what that will involve, because I think in the post-COVID world, we really don't know massively what bus utilization is going to be, what our starting point is going to be, and therefore what we're going to need to do in order to improve bus services across our community and get them better utilized. I was a part of a meeting yesterday to begin a discussion on buses and sort of give my views from a climate emergency perspective, but that is very much in its infancy at the moment. And then in terms of the rest of what you were talking about in terms of cycling, London Road Cycle Route, the Kpis, the speed programme, I'm going to need to refer you to Diana and ask her to get you a specific answer on the points that you've raised. I don't have in my head detail on every single one of the points that you've raised there that I can just pull off. And I would much rather that Diana and the officer group that are responsible for these pieces of work give you an actual genuine answer rather than something that I think I might recall from some point in the past. So we will commit to getting you to answers on the rest of those questions, particularly around the metrics that you mentioned at the end there.
Right, I have Rachel, Rochelle, Sarah and Alison, and I'm going to ask you if you could, hang on Paul, if you could just ask one question each, please, because you have already had a turn, and then I'm going to end the contributions. Paul, if you want to come back to something Greg has said, can you do that briefly, please?
Yeah, yes, thank you. And thank you for your responses, Gregor. It was on the motion 420. It's actually minuted as a strategy for lower transport emissions. And what that means is it's all emissions, not carbon. It's clearly stated as that. And that's what my speech was about, and that's what I was promoting. You're talking about PM 2.5s, PM 10s, NOx, and all types of emissions. This has been changed, and I don't know why it's been changed. It's minuted in our documents as strategy to lower transport emissions.
Okay, Rachel, one question, please.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just a follow up to the answer on local deliberative processes. I noticed in the task and finish group recommendations, so on page 132 under behavioural change, it says the recommendation is to submit the findings of the evaluation of potential deliberative processes to the Overview Scrutiny Management Committee for evaluation and scrutiny. So can I propose that report actually comes to this committee before it goes to executive?
I'll second that.
Which report?
Yeah, we were talking about deliberative processes.
Which report are you talking about, Rachel?
Well, I mean, my main point is, can we have that report that Gregor referred to? Can we have it here at this committee for scrutiny before it goes to executive?
Which particular report, please, just so we can be absolutely.
So I'm on page 132 of the pack under behavioural change. It was a recommendation of the task and finish group. But my overall point is that I would propose that that report comes here first.
That's a recommendation in the task and finish report.
Yeah,
We'll be
so-
discussing it in the next item.
My proposal is that it does come here first. For
Could you please point me to the page and the small number that you're referring to so that we're
It's point
clear?
3 on page 132. I appreciate that we are discussing that next, but I thought it was pertinent things we talk about deliberative processes to bring
That's
that
the
up
bit
at this point.
findings of the evaluation of potential deliberative processes. That one, is it, that paragraph?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, well, that's been proposed. Was there a seconder for that?
Pauline, can I say that's one of the recommendations we'll be discussing in the next
Yes.
item? And I hope all members will vote to support that recommendation.
Yeah, I don't really see the point in discussing it now when we're going to be talking about it later. I mean, I'm glad to see a proposer and a seconder, and I hope that you will be willing to support it when we come to that report. But let's just deal with one thing at a time, if you don't mind.
Okay, that's fine.
Rochelle.
Okay, why isn't photovoltaic panels put on all Wokium-owned buildings, including Chute End, all schools in the borough, and in particular in the 2 maintained schools in Winnish, where we still have old terrapin buildings, which are terribly energy inefficient, and we want to do something to fix this problem. If Woking is setting the example for local residents and for businesses by putting photovoltaic panels and everything and showing what we are not only, we're showing what we believe in as well as trying to do something. And lastly, having nothing to do with that, the biggest barrier to electric vehicles is the cost, in case you haven't realized that. You didn't have that as the one problem. They're 10 to 20,000 pounds more than a petrol-based vehicle. And that's the problem for why we're not using them.
So on the solar panels on public buildings and on schools, we have committed to putting solar panels onto the roofs of our schools. We are going through a process at the moment of assessing the rooftops. They have to be strong enough to support the solar panels in terms of wind loading. It's one of the most important things. So if you look at Chute End, for example, my understanding is that actually at the moment it's not substantially strong enough to support solar panels if under wind pressure of a certain speed. So at the moment it has been ruled out for solar panels, but it will be reviewed again in the future. We're doing exactly the same process with the other council-owned estate that we have, including the schools. With the schools, we have to remember very, very clearly that we're putting state-of-the-art energy generating equipment alongside our children at some of the buildings that aren't necessarily the most modern across our borough. So we have to do this properly, we have to do it safely. And if there is any question mark in terms of safety, we won't be doing it at that school at all. But we've already begun the process across certain schools. And I think Hillside Primary in particular is going to be one of our testbed sites in terms of all of the technology that we currently have available to us. And what is possible from our statement of intent of putting solar panels onto the roof of schools and other public buildings. You make a really good point about cars and their expense being one of the primary barriers to getting them. The interesting thing about them is that if you look at business in particular, the biggest buyers of new vehicles in the UK are company car fleets. And company car fleets are actually quite rapidly progressing over to electric vehicles. So Teslas, Polestars, Nissan Leafs, and other options. As that happens, those leases tend to last 3 to 4 years. And at the end of those leases, they then become available on the second-hand car market, significantly cheaper than brand new. This has been a process that has occurred within this industry for many, many years. Business adopts first, it creates the volume and it creates the demand that then filters through and makes things cheaper for individuals on the other side of it. We've seen it with computers as well. We're seeing it with electric vehicles. It's following a very set process. And as a result of that, we can be confident that actually over the next 3, 4, 5 years, as businesses adopt electric vehicles, so more vehicles will become available further down the road for private and individual buyers. The other thing to remember is that actually, while the physical vehicle itself is often more expensive than its petrol or diesel counterpart, one, the government has already announced that it will be banning the sale of new petrol and diesel cars from 2030, brought forward, which is absolutely fantastic. And secondly, you've got to look at the whole life cost of the vehicle as well, because while the purchase price or the lease of the vehicle might be expensive, you're not then paying for fuel, or you can fuel it at home at a fraction of the cost of filling the tank. So actually, one of the biggest barriers to adoption of EV cars and EV vehicles is people understanding the whole life cost of the car, not necessarily just the upfront cost of the car. It's a piece of education work that clearly we have to do. We can do comms around it. We can do other behavioural change initiatives around it. And you're absolutely right to raise it. But I think we'll also see market forces bringing more electric vehicles into our public domain very shortly as well.
Can you send me the dates when the Winnish schools are going to be considered for for PV, and also for replacement of their old terrapins which were used when they were put in?
Yeah, I'll speak to Ian Goff and get you a direct response to that, Richard.
Thank you. Sarah, one question, please.
Thank you. I just actually wanted to agree about the lifetime cost of EVs. They're actually cheaper. I think one of the biggest barriers is range anxiety and the charging infrastructure. But the point I was going to make was just around the energy generation in the solar farms, and we should totally be generating our own energy. I think the slight issue I have is we are already calculating a reduction in our carbon emissions from the decarbonisation of the grid in our climate emergency action plan. So we have that at the very beginning. So we have that trajectory going down. So we're then decarbonising the grid through solar farms and effectively double counting. And that's where the issues are. We should totally be contributing to it, but we can't be counting twice.
I'm not convinced that we are counting twice, actually. The government has announced that by 2030, all domestic properties will be powered by offshore wind, and that will clearly have a significant impact on our carbon footprint from energy. But we've also got to look at businesses. We've got to look at some of the big institutions that exist within our borough as well, including the Borough Council and its own energy consumption. For context, by the way, the Barkham solar farm will actually completely counteract the council's energy requirements, not necessarily its gas requirements as well, but we're looking at that separately. But the Barkham Farms solar farm will generate enough electricity to offset the council's electricity use, which is really interesting and a sort of bold statement from us as well. We have to look at all of the organisations that are using energy across our borough, and not all of them are going to get or benefit from the fully decarbonised grid that is going to impact on homes. So I think it's still beneficial for us to be providing energy into the grid. I think there is still a carbon saving to be had from it. I don't believe that we're double counting. If we ever get to the point where we do believe we're double counting, then the methodology that we're using on our carbon footprint will compensate for that, and we would take it out accordingly. But at the moment, and up until 2030, I genuinely believe we will only be net benefiting the grid.
Thank you. And lastly, Alison.
Thank you. Gregor, I just wanted to ask a question about the list on page 58, the deliverables plan for the next 3 months. Could you explain what 12 Rectory Road and 75 London Road, what are those projects, please?
Yeah, great question, because it isn't 100% clear, and I do apologise for that. I had to confirm myself. So 75 London Road is a social housing project. We've gone to an independent body called Salex. We've asked for additional funding from them in order to generate some carbon savings. We will be installing solar panels and batteries and some air source heat pumps at that site in order to bring down the carbon footprint of that social housing project as it is being built. 12 Rectory Road is a community facility. It has been approved by the planning committee earlier on this year, I think February, March time. In their committee, it was signed off. It's a community contact support centre. So it's an opportunity, a place for residents to come to if they need help and other such services. And again, it's a facility that we've got external funding for in order to install solar panels, air source heat pumps, and some other energy efficiency initiatives too as well.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, all of you, for your very interesting questions and contributions. And many, many thanks to Gregor for spending so long with us answering those questions. This is a committee that wants to see progress. And so I'm going to suggest that we have another report back a little bit later in the year to see what additionally has been done. The annual update is coming to the full council in July, and the officers produce a quarterly update report. So I'm going to suggest that we have another one of these in October, which will be 3 months after the July council meeting. So if nobody's got an objection to that, I'd like to make a formal recommendation that we note the progress on the action plan and ask for an update in October. Is anyone willing to second that? Thank you very much. May I see those in favour of that as a recommendation? Anybody against? One against. Thank you very much indeed. That's super. And thank you again to Gregor and all of you for your questions. Right, now we move to item 8 on the agenda, which is on page 125. This report is about additional things that we would like the executive members and senior officers to consider adding to the work that they're already doing. And if they accept it, then I hope that they will look at it in a cross-cutting way. I'll stop for a moment while Alison has a new... What's wrong with that one? Did it fall down? I hope that the officers and the leading members will look at it in a cross-cutting way, because it does affect all departments and all portfolios, and departments do need to talk to one another about how progress is being made. I'm assuming that we've all read the whole report. It features deliberations of many people, members, officers, external people, over many weeks and many iterations. Most of this report is now background. The recommendations are the ones on page 130 to 132, and those are really what we've got to look at tonight to see whether we support them as a committee. So I think there's no need for us to repeat anything that's written there. It's really only about, is there anything that we would take exception to and not want in the report? So let's turn to page 130, and I'm going to go through each section in turn. There's 5 different sections: transport, homes, renewable energy, behaviour change, and other priorities. So I'll take each of them in turn and just ask for any adverse comments, basically. So looking at transport, first of all, on which is the whole of page 130 and the top of page 131. Guy.
Question of clarity. Numbers. I want to speak Latin then. On number 6, review the approved plans to South Woking Distributor Road and ensure that this and future road schemes, including schemes currently in design phase, provide safe cycle routes, segregated, blah, 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 on both road traffic and pedestrians. Hasn't that road already been done in terms of planning applications, or am I going slightly mad? If not, wouldn't it be easy just to say that effectively future road schemes are...
It has been through planning committee, yes, it has been given approval. You're right. No. Yes, I've seen Sarah. Thank you. Sorry, carry on, Guy.
Yeah, so wouldn't it be easier to basically, if not remove this one or just alter it to basically ensure that future road schemes provide safe cycle routes segregated from road traffic pedestrians in line with the recommendations. Wouldn't that just be easier? It just seemed weird that the South Woking distributed roads in there if it's already gone through.
Are you making that as a formal proposal?
I'm happy to if required.
Could you repeat it then, so I can write it down?
I just want I want the clarification before I can get the sorry what?
Chair.
Please.
Carry on, please, Guy.
Chair.
No, if someone's shouting on the.
So I've got my hand up, Chair.
Sarah, what are you shouting about? Get it off your chest, please.
It's the clarification, I think, Chair.
I was just saying I could provide clarification on this and the reason why it's in there. Is that okay?
Not at the moment. Let's finish hearing Guy, please, and then we can discuss it.
I'll wait. I'll wait for the clarification, but just for as a proposal, basically ensure that future road schemes provide safe cycle routes segregated from both road traffic pedestrians in line with recommendation LTN 120. Go with that for now.
Okay, thank you. Would there be a seconder to that as a proposal? Norman, thank you. Right, well, let's just discuss that then.
Chair. Hello, Chair. I've had my hand up. I'm on the screen. I should be on the screen, Chair.
Yeah, so you are on the screen, Andy.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me. Should we not look at the reasons why the Task and Finish group had this wording as it is? Because we did spend some time discussing this exact issue. So it just seems a bit weird that we're not going to discuss it and explain why we included it, even though, as Guy says, the planning permission has already been granted. And the reason is, Guy, is because although the planning permission has been granted, because the applicant is Wokingham Borough Council, the borough can still change its mind. It hasn't necessarily committed itself to that current course of action. So there is hypothetically still room for the borough to change its mind on this. It's not like we've given planning permission to, say, a private householder who is now at liberty to go off and do what they want. So that's why we've left it in there and used that form of words. Thank you.
I'll now come to Sarah.
Is that the same answer?
Well, I can add to the answer as well. The road isn't built yet. And the point is, if we still have roads that haven't been built yet, that don't have segregated cycling, that we actually are going to need in order to reduce our car journeys, we still have an opportunity. And that's why this recommendation is in there.
Okay.
Chair, can I come back quickly?
Yes.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Sarah, for the explanation. I still think I'll change my recommendation slightly, because this seems like it's still, when I read this recommendation, it's still only to me, it seems like South Wokingham Distributor Road, that is the primary course of it, and everything else can disappear. So effectively, I would like it to be, I'm changing my recommendation, hence why I wanted to wait originally, is to ensure that future road schemes, including schemes currently in design phase, provide safe cycle routes segregated from both road traffic and pedestrians in line with recommendation LTN 120, such as the current project is South Wokingham Distribution Road, as an example. Because right now, I just don't like it that it's right up front when this is an important issue that needs to be covered across the entire borough, not just have one distributor road project front and centre. That is my concern on this wording. It may be pedantic, but it just doesn't sit right with me.
I'd be prepared
to second that. Thank you, Guy. I'm going to ask Norman to come in now.
Thank you. I mean, this particular scheme has got planning approval. As I understand it, it was the planning on it was started quite a long time ago, about 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it certainly was fully compliant with all the guidelines at the time. The scheme allows for a path that is segregated from the road traffic, so it mixes cyclists and pedestrians, but they are removed from the road, and it is a wider path than just about any other, I think, that's ever been put in the borough. So I think in this particular case, it seems best to let it go ahead as it is, because this is a segregated route, and that's what we've been asking for years. If we were to go back now and change it, it would mean a major change to the whole scheme, as I understand it, because all the houses have been granted, all the whole scheme has been designed. If the cycleway and the pedestrian way were to be completely segregated from each other, it would clearly take up a lot more space, which would impact on the development. So I think all in all, we are getting a good cycleway and footpath, and it has been approved. So in this particular case, I think we should let that one go. The new guidelines were brought in very recently, and all the design on this was done prior to that. And indeed, it actually complies with current guidance. It gets a high enough score when you score it against the current guidance that it actually meets government standards, and it qualifies for potential government grant funding because it's a good enough scheme. So I think all in all, we should just let that one go through, and I think really we should remove this recommendation from here. Thank you.
I'm a little confused because you seconded Guy's proposal, which was to amend this and to include segregating cycle routes from road traffic and pedestrians, but that wasn't what you were just seeming to say. So could you and Guy get some clarification on that?
I think for future schemes, I think Guy said, rather than for this, which is an existing scheme.
Guy, would you like to clarify?
Chair, just to repeat what I was suggesting, it was to basically it's basically to ensure it's effectively removing the first line and to basically say ensure that future road schemes, including schemes currently in the design phase, provide safe cycle routes segregated from both road traffic pedestrians in line with recommendation LTN 120. And as an example, we have the South Wokingham Distributor Road to basically have as an example of the project, how it, from what Norman describes as how it should be being done. We need to prevent things being changed elsewhere in that regard. It's basically looking to the future as opposed to looking at across all of the borough, rather than just have one road front and centre, which the original proposal seems to be.
Okay, thank you. And Norman, as a second, are you happy with that wording?
Can we just have it repeated concisely, just to be sure, please?
To ensure that future road schemes, including schemes currently in the design phase, provide safe cycle routes segregated from both road traffic and pedestrians in line with the recommendation in LTN 120. Are you happy with that?
I think I would prefer to just say in line with LTN 120 rather than the detail in the middle of it, actually.
So,
Norman, the issue is with LTN 120 is what does that mean? I don't know I absolutely detest acronyms. I prefer to have a little description. Paul could tell me every acronym under the sun when it comes to highways. I won't remember them.
LTN is local transport note.
Thank you.
And just for clarification from Norman, the local transport note 2/08 also included segregated cycleways. It recommended wherever possible to put in segregated cycleways. And then LTN 1/12 came out, and that also recommended segregated cycleways wherever possible. So this is not new.
Okay, are you two now happy with each other's wording? Because I've still got two in the air, which is one as it is, but leaving out the approved plans, and then Norman saying let's leave out the middle. Anyway, let me come to Sarah while you think that through.
Yeah, I'm still a little unclear because actually what Guy did end up saying was just putting as an example, the South Woking Distributor Road at the end, which I think most of us could agree to. I just want to come back on a couple of things. The plans for the South Woking Distributor Road aren't actually LTN 120 compliant. In order to actually improve it so it is, there's actually 3 metres on either side of the shared cycle and footway for grass verge. And it takes only 1 metre of that additional 6 metres to do it. So it's not taking any more land from any housing or anything. It's actually not as difficult as is being made out. The other thing to bear in mind is you mix cyclists with pedestrians, you're going to have problems. It's dangerous for the pedestrians as well. When we have more e-bikes being used and when e-scooters are legalised, they will be using cycleways. You cannot have those with pedestrians. We will have to upgrade this in the future at a much more substantial cost than if we get it right now. And that's why it's really crucial that we ask that it is looked at again. I'd be quite happy to support what Guy was proposing to put the SWDR as an example at the end and not have it as the focal point. I think we could agree to that, but it needs to be mentioned in there. And schemes that are currently in the design phase do need to be included. As Paul said, previous iterations of the local transport notes include this as well. So it's not new. It was chosen to be ignored at the time. And we must stop that. We need to be more innovative and proactive.
Alison, as chairman of the Task and Finish group, do you have any comments?
Well, having listened to the points from Norman and Guy and other members, I think what's being proposed is to change the recommendation to say that all future road schemes should be compliant with LTN 120.
So you don't think the middle bit is worth putting in, not relevant?
I want to achieve a recommendation that will be accepted by the executive and, put into action.
So what, I mean, this is going off standing orders a little bit, but what exactly would you propose as chairman of the Task and Finish group?
All future road schemes should be compliant with the recommendations of LTN 1/20.
So leaving out the middle bit detail. Right. Let me just remind people that we're not a decision-making committee, and what we recommend to the executive, they can accept, reject, change. So, whatever we decide to do tonight, it doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. It'll be up to the executive to decide. So, given that Alison chaired the Task and Finish group, I think probably the best recommendation or amendment is that we ensure that future road schemes, including schemes currently in the design phase, are planned in line with the recommendations of LTN 120. Sarah?
I'd just like to reiterate what you said, actually. These are recommendations. We can't guarantee that the executive are going to accept them, but based on all the evidence that was put in front of us as a Task and Finish group, we came to this conclusion of a recommendation as the right thing to do. And to change it now just doesn't make any sense. I'm quite happy with the tweak that Guy suggested, but this is a recommendation based on factual evidence that we had from experts. So it doesn't make sense to water it down in a view that maybe they might be more likely to accept it. This is what we're asking them to do.
Yes, remember though, the Task and Finish group, its job is just to recommend to this committee. So any changes that the committee wants to make, we're quite entitled to make them, whether we like them or not. Anyway, we do seem to have agreed on a change, which 2 or 3 people want and 2 or 3 people don't. So I'm going to actually move to a vote on this.
Yeah, just to clarify, effectively, what I was asking for and what Alison has suggested and what has been suggested in all is basically LTN 120. At least I now know what it is, so I'm going to go read that later.
Thank you, Paul.
Effectively, yeah, we need to provide we need to basically provide that future roads are done with this. So I'm happy to accept your proposal on that. But I do think it should be minuted in this committee that the South Woking Distributor Road should be an example of us to keep an eye on this. Just from our point of view, just from the point of view of we need to be able to keep a visible check on potential projects that are potentially going to be impacted. And we all know that that considering what Paul just implied, that what was it you said, LTN 108 or something like that? 208. So let me guess, that was done in, so let me guess, those were done in 2008 and 2012. So this is going to change again in 2-3 years' time.
Okay.
So I'm happy to keep with LTN 120 for now, but we just need to minute that we need to keep an active eye on this. So I'm happy to believe what you proposed just now.
Right. So shall I read
So I
it
second
again?
that.
Shall I read it again, which is what I think you and Norman have proposed? That we ensure that that we ensure that future road schemes, including schemes currently in the design phase, provide safe cycle routes in line with the recommendations of LTN 120. Is that okay? Well, obviously there's a difference of view on this, so I will move to a vote. May I first see those who would like to see that change, who are in favour of that amendment? If you could put up your hands, please. It's not supposed to be speaking. Anyway, Andy, you wanted to come in. Can you be brief, please, because you are really only an observer. Can't hear you. You're on mute. You're
My
muted.
apologies.
That's better.
Thank you, Polly. My apologies. I thought I was invited to contribute. I can observe on YouTube like everybody else. So I think so we're going to recommend that we do something we're going to have to do anyway, because that's the nature of the local transport notes, isn't it? And as others have said, we are not the decision makers. I think this is something the Task and Finish group said the decision should be made by the executive. They do have the chance, if they wish, to change what happens on the Southern Distributor Road. It's not for us to take that opportunity to think again away from them. That's my last comment on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I'm now going to move to that amendment from Guy, seconded by Norman. Can I see those in favour of that? You could put up your hands, please. 6. That's 6. And may I see those against?
Can I have it minuted that I'm against, please? Thank you.
That change is carried then from 6 votes in favour to 5 against. But I take Guy's point. Could we minute the fact that the SDR is an example, and also that we would like to check future projects for compliance? Okay, thank you very much. All right, is there anything else on transport that anybody wants to change? Okay, let's move to homes then on page 131. Are you happy with what's written in homes? Okay, recommendations on renewable energy. And that's just at the bottom of page 131. Then page 132, behaviour change. This is a difficult one, but we have got some recommendations that we think might help. And then finally, the other priorities. Okay, in that case then, I'd like to propose our recommendation that we send the climate emergency task and finish. Sorry, Paul. Yeah, come on.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got one comment on page 128. At the very top, on 1.1, the second line should say initial climate emergency action plan, and that's per minute 60 of the full council of 23rd of January 2020.
So what did you want to change?
It should have the word initial in front of Climate Emergency Action Plan. That is the minute, number 60 of the full council of the 23rd of January 2020. And that should be amended in this report and any other similar references to it as well.
Okay. Alison, as chairman of the group, are you happy with that?
I am. I'd also say in 1.1 it says,
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
we're very happy with it.
Right. Well, with those two changes then, I propose that we send the climate emergency task and finish group report to executive to consider adopting its recommendations. Okay, may I see those in favour of doing that? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's everybody. Thank you very much indeed.
Chair, just quickly,
Yeah.
can I just also on the record thank the members of the Task and Finish group, because I know this has been a lot of work, both members in the chamber and those that have contributed from outside the chamber as well currently, because there's been a lot of work done in here. It hasn't been bodged for the lack of description, so I'd just like to thank them personally.
Thank you. And I was also going to thank Alison for chairing it all so professionally, and also to thank the members of it, including those like Sarah who had to fit it around domestic needs like picking up children from school. So thank you for doing that and then coming back to the groups afterwards. So I would like to thank everybody for their work. It has been a very long task. Alison, you had your hand up, and then Sarah.
I was simply wanting to highlight the contributions from all of the members. I think only Sarah, no, actually, I think only Pauline and I made it to the end. Sarah joined the process. Andrew Mickleborough was invaluable. He made a lot of very worthwhile contributions while he was part of the group, and Andy and Malcolm, continued despite stepping back from the council. It was great to keep them on board. I particularly wanted to thank all the officers, especially Neil. Also highlight the input from John Booth from Reading Friends of the Earth. It was very useful. We really took advantage of being on Zoom. It's an excellent format for task and finish. We were able to get experts from, Professor Paul Chatterton from Leeds, Dr. Carmichael from London, Vijay Fixek of Reading Buses. They were all able to give us an hour in the middle of the working day, which they couldn't have done if they were having to travel to Shoot End. So I'd just like to commend that any future task and finishes were not held in Shoot End, that they continue to be held virtually. So thank you again to everyone that took part.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate I had to nip out every meeting for 15 minutes to get the kids, so I do appreciate that. Just very quickly, we've obviously just agreed to this report now, so I just wanted to ask officers on the call still, will the report on potential deliberative processes be ready to come to the July? I think we've got a meeting in July, don't we? Yes. Will they be ready for the July scrutiny meeting, please?
Neil? Oh,
Hi,
okay.
it's Rhiannon. Hi. We're working on it at the moment. We're hoping it's going to be there by July. It's got to go through the forward programme, but the intention is it'll certainly be coming in the next few months.
Thank you. Could we maybe have it for July, even if it's not quite finished, so we can see where we're at? Because otherwise we've got to wait till September, and my fear is it's going to get to exec without a chance for us to scrutinise it, which quite often happens with a lot of things.
Yeah, it's our full intention that it will, but obviously it's got to be approved as it goes through the process. And so I think it's got to go through CLT and everything else. So, everything we can do, we'll do to get it there in July.
Thank you. Jim.
Thank you, Chair. This has obviously been a very collaborative task and finish group. I'd like to ask the Chair if there's any chance that we could share some lessons learned to help other task and finish groups to work in such a way. What's been produced is excellent, so can we share it?
Yep.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Alison, anything to share?
Well, this is the second task and finish group on climate emergency that I've chaired, and that certainly was a conclusion we had the last time, that it is a very effective way of cross-party working. You know, politics didn't come into it at all, did it, Sarah? We all really enjoyed it. We learnt a whole lot more. I might have to go away and formally think about what I could set down, but you know, couldn't have done it all without Neil.
I just think it's a good example of good work, and therefore the more we share it to help others do the same, I think would be a good idea.
Thank you, Jim. Let's move on to agenda item 9, work programme 2021 to 22. We're asked to review it and prioritise the items and consider any other potential items for inclusion, and note that we can add further items during the year. The actual list that we're looking at is on page 170 to 171. Some of them have already been agreed, if you note the minutes from last meeting, and some are standard agenda items. And just to remind you that there could be more after the next meeting, because the executive members, or at least John Halsaw is coming to this meeting, the executive members are going to their own equivalent scrutiny committees, and they may suggest other things that we want to put on that are going to be on their forward programmes. So we maybe need to leave a little bit of room for anything that executive might be looking at. Now I'm going to go through them one at a time. So Sarah, your hand's up. Is it about a specific one or a general point?
I was just going to say, I think there are 2 items that probably need to be prioritised for July. I just wanted to make these suggestions.
Can we deal with them one at a time?
Okay.
Okay. And then we can, because we've been asked to put dates beside them, so we can do that as we go through. The development of the work programme, number 1, that's what we do anyway. Number 2 is already there for July. Number 3, the response to the pandemic, including green recovery, code-produced anti-poverty strategy, and partnership working to tackle poverty. I would suggest that we do keep this one on, but that we look at it sort of later in the year when the real impact can be seen, because we're still in the midst of COVID and we still don't know what's going to happen. Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, the poverty one isn't actually just about COVID. We had an issue before COVID.
No, yeah.
And I was going to suggest, given that we've got some, it's very difficult to prioritise when all issues, you know, they're all urgent. I was going to suggest September for the air poverty one.
Yeah. Neil, do you think that's practical? Yep.
It's possible, yeah.
It's possible. Okay, well, we'll put it for September then. If it doesn't work for September, it'll have to go over to October, but we'll aim for September then. So that's number 3. The quarterly KPIs, they come up anyway, don't they? And we've had one today, so sorry, Jim. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, Chair, my hand was up very early. 4 and 5, as I suggested earlier when we spoke about the KPIs, I think perhaps we could, I think there's a benefit in trying to spread it across the year, so we don't spend one meeting talking completely about everything, and we share the load so we get a better understanding and a better view of what's happening in each of the different places. So that's that. I think that was 4 and 5. I'd just like to see them phased across the year if we can. That's a suggestion.
I think Will has gone, so it's a bit difficult to ask him his view on whether he can do that. Can I ask if Neil would check that out with Will to see if that would be possible, so long as everybody else is happy with it? Is anybody not happy with doing it that way? Norman?
I agree with Jim, actually. I think it'd be a good idea. Maybe take the directorates one at a time so that we focus a little bit more in each meeting on a different area. And I think that would be a good idea.
Super. Well, I will leave it to Neil to talk to Will to see whether it is possible to do that. And if it is, then we'll perhaps come back to it next well and decide which order we're going to do it.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Sarah.
Can I just add, I think it's a good idea to be able to focus on each of the directorates, but we still need to see the KPIs across the board, because if we're only looking at them then annually, we have a problem that we might miss. We still need to see all of them.
Well, we would be seeing all of them, wouldn't we? One at a time.
No, I mean quarterly, because if we're only seeing the KPIs annually, that's a problem. We need to see all KPIs quarterly, but maybe have a focus on one of the directorates once a year.
Well, forgive me if I'm wrong, Jim, but I think what you're suggesting is that we still do look at all of them quarterly, but that we don't look at all of them on the same meeting. Is that right?
I'm happy to go with that, but I also think that at every meeting there's an opportunity to take a directorate and split it down even further than even quarterly. I think to be able to focus on everything that we've got is difficult. To focus properly and scrutinise, we need to almost every meeting have a different directorate there we can go through.
Okay, Guy.
Thank you, Chair. Jim's making a point, but however, I think this is basically being executed already in the other committees, subservient to this one, simply because it's the role of this committee to basically dole out the work, for the lack of a better description. And we've already had, you can tell I've just come back from holiday. We had a review of the directorate giving updates and strategies and concerns already at community and corporate. That's where we can go into the nitty gritty of things. Basically, take the KPIs aspect and basically use them as the report card that they need to report back to those committees at. I don't feel that we should do it at management level on that regard, and apart from maybe chief exec level. But it should be subservient to the other committees, as it were.
Guy, which ones do you actually look at CNC?
I think it's more of a case of what I don't look at. Budget, so probably number 9. Well, technically all the KPI aspects come under community and corporate. Please don't make me set more emergency meetings.
No.
I think the committee will start to murder me.
Just for clarity, I'm not talking about taking all of that detail away, but perhaps even the corporate committee could provide us with a summary and an overview so we can actually look and understand better each of the different directorates. And it's working together across those committees. At this moment in time, we get given a set of quarterly KPIs, which is difficult to go through and to understand. So if we can have regular updates and summaries, I'm not saying we have to go into all of the detail and duplicate anything. God forbid we duplicate anything. I just like to see a more phased approach, so we as a committee get a better understanding and more opportunity to add value.
Let me make a compromise suggestion. If we go back to the KPI report that we looked at earlier, there are actually 6 areas that we looked at as an overview. Now, if we were to look at 2 each meeting, then that would be quarterly for all of them. How's that for an idea, Jim and Sarah? Sarah?
I just wanted to remind the minutes from the 24th of February, we were actually supposed to get a report from Will or Laura on this about a proposal for how we can actually utilise our time in this committee better on these reports. So we're actually making decisions at the moment without having seen that report that's supposed to come to this committee. So maybe if we can have that report at July and then look at the proposed recommendations from the officers on potential ways of doing this, that might be better than making a decision now without the officer here to support.
Well, I have asked Neil if he will check with Will what's possible, but Jim, what do you think about that?
Evidence-based decisions is much better than making it up. Say I'm happy with that.
Okay, Alison.
Yes, table it for now.
Alison.
During the training last night, Kate discussed the potential benefits of having a sort of pre-meeting in advance. And I just wondered if, when we've got the KPIs coming forward, that we did a Teams half an hour in advance of the meeting, just to flag up the issues of what we wanted to dig into, so we could be a bit more coordinated in our adding value.
Sarah?
My only slight issue with that is these are public meetings and that wouldn't be a public meeting. But
no, I don't mean that we would not ask questions still, just that we could coordinate, you know, what it is that we want to look at more. I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, I think most of us were at the training yesterday.
Look, in order to make business, I think it would be best if we asked Neil to discuss the options with Will, and then we have it on the agenda next time to decide what we will do, as Jim said, based on the evidence of what the officers can do. Is that okay? Righto then, thank you. Right, so that's 3, 4 and 5, which we'll come back to. The implications of climate emergency, we've done that one. Scrutiny progress on the local plan update and the 5-year land supply and the delivery of affordable housing. Those two really go together. Rochelle, sorry.
We've only had one meeting in the last 18 months, so I'm not sure there's too much local plan update that could possibly be put in here. Suggestion of having more meetings of the local plan update committee might be a great idea for the scrutiny committee to suggest. 18 months is a long time to try to, and nothing's happened in the meantime, pretty much.
Guy and then Rachel.
Michelle makes a valid point. I think that was a suggestion of we look at that towards the winter and then start yelling at people if we haven't had an update. But also, just to comment on planning, we've got an upcoming meeting of Community Corporate. We're looking at the planning department coming forward, so I can maybe ask a question there as well.
So will you be looking at the local plan?
Oh, please no.
Okay.
Please no. I've got the budget. I don't need the local plan.
It was only a question, Guy. Rachel.
I think the local plan update is important enough. It should be dealt with here. Sorry, everyone, but
Point taken. Rachel.
It was just to say, I think scrutiny of the delivery of affordable housing is actually important enough on its own that it should be considered separately, not rolled in with number 7.
Well, we could look at them at the same meeting because there are overlaps, aren't there?
Yeah.
Rochelle.
Part of this is that, among other things, the local plan update group also looks at affordable housing, but as the government is planning on changing everything with affordable housing and reducing the numbers, we don't know what the heck is going to happen.
Yeah, but we have got our own policy,
Yes.
which is 35% affordable housing.
Planning
And that's our council's
Okay.
policy.
Yes.
So I don't think we'll change that. Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, I was going to say regarding point 7, scrutinising progress on the local plan update. I mean, I'd be quite happy to bring that up sooner, even potentially September, just because it's quite an important issue for probably everyone on this committee.
So you would like to do it in September?
No, just a suggestion.
Yeah. Any other views? Hands up if you have any other views.
There is no progress on this right now, so there's nothing we can say on it. Nothing has happened since then, since November.
Rachel?
I think, as Alison was just saying, this is about the process. You know, we don't want to wait till it's all done and then look at it afterwards. We need to be contributing during when it's happening. So we need to know what's happening and get an update, I would argue.
We've already got 2 items for September. What about if we put it in October? Then there might be a bit more progress. Would that be all right, Sam?
Yeah, I'll be happy with that.
Yeah. Okay, so 7 and 8, that same meeting. The council's economic development strategy, Guy, I hesitate to say this, but I rather think that goes with budget.
I think this might be worthwhile looking at with budget, possibly when we are looking at the capital budget towards the end of the budget scrutiny process, which I think is December, January. I see Callum nodding. So yeah, it makes sense to put it with the capital budget aspect on that. So I'm happy. I'm happy to take it.
But you sound very happy. So shall I leave it to you to decide when?
Yeah, we'll take that.
Lovely. Number 10, scrutinising our compliance with the Equality Act. I would suggest if we do this at all, that we do it later in the year, because we are getting a bit crowded in the autumn. Any views on A, whether we should do it, and B, in, say, January? Sarah?
Yeah, we should definitely do it. I think there's a couple of things that are more pressing to come first, so happy with January.
Okay, thank you.
Pauline? Sorry, I was just saying, we need to do it in line with when the council does its annual report. We have to do one on the equality compliance, don't we? I don't know if that's what I was going to ask Neil, but I mean, there's no point timetabling it if it's, you know, we're going to be putting it on the agenda before that report is available.
Well, let's notionally say January, and maybe Neil can check out at some point whether that's still a relevant time.
So the equality plan was approved February, March, so January would seem to be a good timescale.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Number 11. My feeling on number 11 is that Brexit's already happened and there's not a great deal we can do about it, and it's rather bigger than just a council issue, but I'm happy to take views on that, whether we should do it or not. Sarah?
We're still going to be finding out the impacts of it coming up in the future. We still don't know all the impacts, and there are going to be implications for our community that we can help with. So we do need to do this. I believe we probably need to wait a little while. It needs to be sometime in this municipal year, but that might be a January one, a year after it's all happened, and we can have a look and see.
Or we could put it on the list that's at the bottom, which is what the list of things that we put in as they become relevant.
I think a date would be good against it. January would be good.
Can I see who actually thinks we should scrutinise that? Put your hands up if you do. That's only 3. Can I see those who don't? Seven. And those again, abstentions. Oh, okay. Well, that carries that we don't actually look at it, but maybe Sarah, it could come back next year if it's possible to see any implications. Okay. Council's waste strategy. We normally look at that in the autumn anyway. Sarah?
This is the new waste strategy coming up, and I've already spoken with officers on this. They said September would be too late for it to come to scrutiny for us to have a meaningful impact on the direction it takes, so it has to come in July. So, please, that is one of the urgent ones that needs to come in July, please. Because this is the new strategy. This is something that's going to impact every single resident, and we know what our residents are like when it comes to waste and recycling. So we need this as a priority in July, please.
Agreement or not? Yeah, hands up if you think July's okay for that. Super, thank you very much. So that's 12. Breakup of the PPP. We did agree at the last meeting that we would look at that. It'll take a while, I think, for us to see the implications. So I'm going to suggest we put that in February. Yeah, Guy, and then Sarah, then Alison.
I think this is. I think we're already. Isn't this on our forward plan for community and corporate?
Ah.
Yeah.
So you're going to be looking at it?
Yes, I can't remember the exact date, but it was assigned to us originally.
Sorry. Ah,
Yeah.
Callum says it's the extraordinary meeting in July.
Yes.
So that
Yeah.
will
Well,
be
that's why
sooner
that's
as
what's
well.
coming up. So yeah, it's been a long day.
Thank you very much, Guy. Sarah?
I'm pleased that it's being seen in July. Guy, can I make a request? What I was going to request it for this committee, but this probably, given how I was having a chat with the new director for this, and there's a lot of progress already made. This is going to need a lot of scrutiny. Could this be looked at a couple of times throughout this municipal year in the process? So it's not just the one time and check. This is going to have a huge impact for residents.
I suspect that will be the response from the meeting, simply because of the impact it was. And this is something we do on community and corporate all the time. It's constantly being revolved, going through burials. Basically, has been something that has been looked at 3 or 4 times on community and corporate. It has now reached a satisfactory conclusion. It's just how we operate.
No, that's great. Could I also ask Callum, could I have an invite to those meetings, please, as well? Obviously, there's, in addition to the waste strategy, there's all the other sort of contractual things that we tend to look at, like the food waste and all of that. Are we still planning on looking at that here, or is the whole lot? Oh, sorry, wrong waste one, PBP. Ignore me. It's getting late.
Number 14, Gregor did tell me a couple of months ago that he had a report or was preparing a report for us on the website. So again, I wonder if I could ask Neil to check with Gregor when that's coming forward and whether that will include broadband. Thank you. Jim?
Okay. I think this, the way this is written, it needs to be rewritten because it looks as though it's just an improvement to the website and maybe a bit of rollout of broadband. This is a program of work to improve or to look to improve every touch point we have with residents.
Yeah, that's what Gregor told me that they were preparing the report on.
The way it's worded doesn't do it justice, because this is every time we have an interaction with a resident, we're looking at how we can improve it, how we can measure it and how we can improve it. And I think it would be good if we could actually reword that to provide a little bit more focus.
Yeah, I would be happy with that. In fact, that's very much what Gregor said to me several months ago they were actually doing.
I've been working with officers on this for a while now, so
yeah,
I know.
Guy?
It's the incorrect use of the word broadband. We all associate it with the internet. It's nothing to do with the internet. It's one to many. So it's basically the roll out of increased capacity and inclusive services or something like that. It's the wrong use of the term broadband. That's what we're all getting confused over.
Given that it's reworded, can I leave it to Neil to have a chat with Gregor and see when it'll come forward? Rochelle?
And also look at the bandwidth the borough has. So we had all the problems with Teams in the past, and it's still an ongoing problem because of bandwidth. We can't be on, we're not allowed to have our videos on at all, which does kind of kill us a little bit as far as that goes. Well, it's the well, that's Teams, but it's also the bandwidth coming in, the pipeline coming into the council. We need a little bit more.
Jim?
Again, just to re-emphasize, this is a program of work to look at how we improve every interaction with our residents and how we measure every interaction with our residents, whether it's through Teams or phone or face-to-face or whether it's through the website. It's a huge program of work. And even here tonight, we're misinterpreting something. So I think it needs some significant rewording.
Yeah, and particularly including the call centre. A lot of people have troubles with. Yeah.
I think, Guy, this may also be on your forward programme.
It is.
So we need to rationalise who's dealing with it. We can do that outside the meeting if that helps.
Yes, please. And if people are interested in it, it does come up in mind, please do come along. More the merrier.
Right. Okay. Travellers encampments. There've been quite a few of these recently. Looking at what we've already got, we haven't got anything for November. So can I suggest we put that into November? I know we'd rather look at it sooner, but we don't want to be here till midnight any night. Rochelle?
Could we also add the possibility of having a transit site for travelers in that? Because it's part of the reason how we can move them on. If we have transit sites, we can move them on much easier.
But 2 or 3 years ago, the council was looking for more transit sites. I don't know what became of that. So maybe we could have
talk to me later, I can tell you.
Probably everybody said, I don't want it in my backyard. Jim and then Alison.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. When we started looking at this last year, it was to get an holistic, to look at a holistic solution, including things like transit sites and powers, and also the impacts of the new legislation that's coming in. That should be something that has been completed by now, because I know they've updated the website. I know they've updated the information to support private landowners, etc. So it should be a report that should almost be off the shelf if they followed through on what we did last year.
Sure. Can we do that in November then? Council's role in tree protection and scrutinising the council's emerging tree strategy. I want to elide those two because they do overlap. It was agreed at the last meeting that we include it, but because our programme's getting a bit full, can I suggest that we leave that until February? Neil?
I think the discussion last time was to set up a task and finish group. So that would be supplementary to this meeting. So that was the reason for its inclusion. And we could do that in July and set it up and let it run.
That's a lot of officer time for a task and finish group. No, I would prefer that the main committee looked at it. Paul?
Neil's right. At the last meeting, we agreed we'd have a task and finish group set up for number 16, because that was tree protection on developments, and it included Bearwood Park, where the 450 mature trees have been taken out.
Can you point me to the exact minute, page 5 onwards, as to where we agreed it would be a task and finish group?
Bear with me.
Yeah, okay.
Get the X-ray specs on. Page 7.
Right. Bullet point
10.
10.
With my name next door to it as well.
Be considered by a task and finish group.
Yeah, we could only say it would be considered by a task and finish group, but we had to bring it to this committee to then agree that.
Right. I'd be happier if it came to the full management meeting, but I'm happy to be guided by the other people.
Chair, we've got to go into an awful lot of detail on some of this, because Bearwood Park's a disaster.
Rochelle?
Can I suggest that it doesn't just include trees, that it's a biodiversity as well, because trees and hedgerows and things like this, they all go together rather than just trees, but it's not just trees, please.
Right, so other people's views, main management or task and finish group? Paul's voting for the task and finish group. Sarah?
A task and finish group, and the tree strategy in the next item, maybe we could have it in the November one.
Well, I would think that they should all go together if they're being looked at.
Well, the task and finish group could be set up to finish for November. So it could be set up at the next July meeting to run till November and bring the report at the same time that we have the tree strategy in November.
So the deliberation of the task and finish group to come back in November. Right. Don't forget, we generally only expect to have one task and finish group per year. So if we devote it to this, there probably will not be any others that ever crops up. But if you're happy with that, then we'll do it. And Paul, I would suggest if we do that you chair it. Alison?
Would that mean that we wouldn't be able to have another task and finish group looking at climate emergency?
Yes, it would. Yeah, that is the case, isn't it, Neil? We just
next year.
which would be next year. 21, 22. Right. Paul thinks that the climate emergency one could come in the next municipal year. Is that right?
At the end of
Could come in, say, April.
Yeah.
We have a bigger meeting in April. March.
that would work.
Yeah, okay. Right. Norman?
Is there terms of reference for if we're taking tree protection to a task and finish group? I mean, is that something that this committee should look at?
Well, the terms of reference are really mapped out for the task and finish group that are specific to the subject it's dealing with. And the committee normally looks at the task and finish group normally looks at those at its first meeting to agree them. Okay, that's how it works anyway, and has worked up till now. Or did you want this committee to do it?
I was really just asking the open question if there was already
That is how it's normally done, but we're free to do what we like in this committee, other than make decisions. Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, I mean, this is an important topic that a lot of residents are quite passionate about, but also looking at the wider biodiversity with the trees, it's relevant to the climate emergency as well from a sequestration point of view. But if we get that back here for November, then at the November meeting, we can set up another task and finish group for the climate emergency to report back in March. So we could actually get two in the municipal.
We can only have one per municipal
I
year.
don't believe that we're limited to that constitutionally. And as long as one is only running at one time, it doesn't take up any extra officer time. So I'm having them one after the other rather than in parallel. That's what I'm suggesting. But there's nothing constitutional to say that we can't do that.
No, I agree. But the practice has been that because of officer time being devoted to COVID, that really it's not reasonable to ask them to do more than one in a year.
We've done 2 rounds of the climate emergency task and finish group in the same municipal year.
Yeah, but that was the same topic, wasn't it?
The trees sort of is part of climate emergency.
Jim?
I was just going to say the same. I think they're actually interrelated. And I think as long as officers agree to the capacity concerns because of the COVID thing, I think running them consecutively like that, so we finish the trees, then we start the climate emergency, I think is a sensible thing to do.
Well, I'll be guided by Neil on this because he's the one who does all the work. What do you think, Neil?
I'm going to be off sick, so you might want to ask. Yes, I think that could work.
Do you? Okay, right. Then Paul, will you chair the tree one?
Well, I'm happy to do that, but I think we need to go to the next meeting to agree it.
Okay, we'll do that. And in the meantime, perhaps Neil could ask the whole of the council for anybody that might be interested in being on it, because it's obviously something that's of broader interest than just the members here. And that is a common practice. Neil, Guy.
Hello, I'm Neil Guy. Just to clarify, for when Neil does send out the email, can we please put it in as potentially biodiversity and tree protection? Because otherwise, if it's just tree protection, I know that some councillors are just going to think TPOs and hold their head in their hands. Where if it's biodiversity and tree protection, we've got a much more interesting topic to cover.
Yep, and that would that would include both of those. Okay, I think Neil's got that point. Alison?
Would number 19, scrutinising the local nature recovery strategy, could that become part of the same task and finish group?
Can I just come in on that?
Yeah.
That's part of the emerging legislation, and it's been delayed in Parliament, so it will be much later in the municipal year.
Yeah. I was going to suggest we put that on the bottom as something to put in if and when it becomes relevant. Looking back at 18, we did agree at the last meeting, and it's in the minutes, that this should go to HOSC, and that members of management committee could go to that meeting if they were interested. Is that okay, Alison?
I think so, because it is the health and well-being overview and scrutiny committee. And it seems that management's got a very packed agenda. So yeah, we'll take that on. And of course, Sarah, you'll be invited to attend.
I was just going to say, it was agreed to be a joint committee meeting. Just a thought on that. They're about to get all these monitors out for the PM 2.5s, and the initial ones are for 6 months. And obviously with COVID, it might be worth looking at that one maybe in the new year when we've actually got some data from the monitors. So I don't know when HOSC is then, but it'd be good to maybe do a joint one. But whatever we decide, I'd definitely like to be invited. But yeah, we need to get some of that data from the monitors first.
Right.
Chair,
Well,
Chair, could I be included in that one
sorry,
as well,
Paul,
please?
obviously,
Could I
but-
be included in that one as well, please?
Well,
When you go to HOSC?
I have remembered now what the minutes say. Sarah's right. It is a joint meeting of us and HOSC.
Yeah, so we would be
be
inviting
invited
members of
anyway,
both committees.
Right. Number 20. I think this is a good idea personally, because when I've presented motions in the past, I've often worried that they've just gone off into the ether and nothing has happened about them. Does anybody else feel that way?
Yes,
Yes, as I mentioned this evening, mine has seemed to have totally changed its name and has disappeared off. And I don't know how that has happened,
Yeah.
because it was a low emissions, nothing really to do with carbon as such.
So shall we keep this one on? But the question is, when will we have it? Because we are getting very booked up. We've got 3 things already for July, 2 for September, 2 for October, 2 for November, and 1 possible one for January. I mean, my inclination is to say, let's do it in the new year. But then another part of me says, well, an awful lot of motions could go through in that time. Sarah?
I was going to suggest this actually could be an annual item to review each of the municipal years, and maybe it could be March each year, and we can look back at the previous year and look at the motions and how they're progressing. Just a suggestion.
Anyone happy with that, or anyone not happy with that, shall I say? Okay, then let's do that in March. That's number 20. 21, 22 and 23 we do anyway, so they'll just come up at the right time. And we also wanted a progress report on climate emergency, which I was going to suggest for October, but I can't remember what Diane said about that now. You?
You suggested October.
Yeah.
Can we agree?
Oh, thank you.
So I'll talk to them.
Glad you're taking notes. Yeah, Alison.
Well, we've just looked at the quarterly report on climate emergency, which covered January, February, March.
Yeah.
So the quarterly report to cover April, May and June should be available in September. So
But it's going to council in July, isn't it?
that would be the annual report.
Yeah.
I don't know if this committee wants to look at the quarterly reports of the climate emergency plan.
I'm just looking at what we've got on the agenda for September. We've got the poverty strategy and the waste strategy.
Waste is July.
July, we've got council leader coming, and that's the waste strategy as well.
We agreed waste was July, Pauline.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll go with that then. Right. Any other views? Okay. Then I think that concludes what we've got to do on this page. And although I was planning to give about 8 of them to Guy, I did resist doing that in the end. Right then, let's look at agenda item 10, the Executive Forward Programme. Any comments on any of that? Sarah?
There was just one item that jumped out, which is on the 29th of July meeting, and that's the procurement strategy, which hasn't come anywhere near scrutiny as far as I'm aware. Is it going to your committee, Guy? If it's not, because I mean, I would quite like it here actually, because
we may need to refer to Neil and Callum. It's definitely not been put on our roadmap. I
No.
think this is the annual or biannual or something like that. I can never remember this. This comes up once every so often, and it's effectively the process in which we go out to tender, the 3 quotes process, et cetera, et cetera. It's basically usually the biannual report in which they are tidying up the procurement processes in the process. That's my recollection.
Yes, I
don't
think you're right.
I don't believe it is this time. I did hear, because I was talking to, I think it was Rianne about this, about changes in procurement from a climate change perspective, and she said there's a new procurement strategy being done. So I'm assuming it's that, and this is actually something a bit bigger than that. And as such, if it's going to exec at the end of July, it sounds like we've only got a couple of items in our July meeting, and there would be space to include this, to have a look at our July meeting before it goes to executive.
Can I ask Neil again if he would check whether it is just a process thing, or whether it's a bigger thing, and maybe email us with the answer. We perhaps make a decision by email. That work?
Can I ask that if it is what I think it is, that it does go on our July agenda, please?
What do the other people think? I see those who would like to have it on the July agenda.
I think if it is what Sarah is suggesting, we should at least take a look at it, even if it's just a quick, I say a quick review.
Yeah.
That's because I look at the budget, so this is anything's quick compared to that. Because if it is a dramatic shift, then it does need to be looked at. If it is effectively removing clause 7 because that particular relevant of law doesn't exist anymore, then we don't need to look at that. So let's, if Neil and the officers can ask, and if it is something dramatic, then we should look at it, because it is. I don't think this is buying paper clips. This is probably something a little more large.
Right. Okay. Well, then we'll leave Neil to do that and to email us, and we'll make a decision based on the results of that email. Super. Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Sarah. Anything else on the executive? Right. In which case, let's move to agenda item 11. For those who are new to this committee, a meeting or two ago, we decided that we would like to just check that what we'd recommended as a committee has been addressed and acted on. And so Neil put together this chart which tells us what's been done and what's still ongoing. I've got one question. Each O&S committee to develop an action tracker report for 2021 to 22 came from February, and then it came up again in March, and both of them say ongoing. Am I just being dense? Neil, can you explain what that's about?
It's just a reminder that the 4 committees have agreed to do this, so we're doing it, and I think all the chairmen are here, so maybe it's for them to consider at their next meetings.
Yeah, that was what I guessed was the case, so I'll pick it up. Right, lovely. Okay, well, if there are no comments then on the action tracker report, I thank Neil for updating us, because it is nice to see that actions are taken. And thank all of you for your contributions tonight, and formally declare that the meeting is finished at 10:09. Thank you for your time tonight. It's been a long meeting. You've been very patient.